Our meeting is broadcast live today on our YouTube channel and will no longer be live streamed to Facebook Live. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch our live meeting as well as find recaps and recordings of past meetings. You can also watch our meeting recording on Facebook, but there is no engagement with users. You can follow our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now on Threads at lacounty.poc or LA County POC, excuse me, for more information about our meetings. And we also encourage you to invite other folks you know to attend. So now I'll provide the public comment instructions in Spanish. Le damos la bienvenida a esta reunión a miembros de la comunidad quienes prefieren hacer sus comentarios en español. Les daremos 4 minutos para los comentarios con traducción y nosotros podemos proveer traducción al inglés. Al iniciar sus comentarios, nomás avísenos que usted prefiere hacer su comentario en español. Okay, so let's see. I will now call the roll call. Commissioners, please respond when I call your name. Commissioner Dolores Canales, actually, we have notification that she is on her way and will be here shortly. Commissioner Frankie Carrillo, he also will be joining our meeting shortly. Commissioner Sean Garcia-Lays.
Present.
Vice Chair Millie Kakani.
Present.
Our Commissioner Sam Lewis has informed us he will be absent today. Commissioner Don Meredith. Commissioner Eduardo Mundo.
Present.
Commissioner Diane Terry. And our chair, Ashay Jackson, she is also unavailable to attend today. So thank you, Chair Kakani. Vice Chair Kakani, we have a quorum and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. So let's proceed with item number 2, the approval of the June 22nd meeting minutes. If you'd like to provide a public comment on this item, please raise your hand now in WebEx. If you are in the room, you can approach the front of the room to get in line when the presentation ends. Do we have any written public comments or live public comments for item number 2?
We do not have any pre-registered public comments on this item.
Right. Can I have a motion to approve the June 22nd meeting minutes? Thank you, Commissioner Meredith. So we have a motion by Commissioner Meredith.
I'll second.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Mundo. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, commissioners, please unmute yourselves and vote with a voice vote. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Moving to agenda item number 3. Again, if you'd like to make a public comment on item 3, please raise your hand now or send a message to the host to ensure you're in queue. So item number 3, we will be discussing and taking appropriate action on updates from the Los Angeles County Probation Department on the movement of youth to Los Padrinos, the status on approvals from the California Board of State and Community Corrections, and plans the department has for continuing to use Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall or Central Juvenile Hall for intake or holding purposes. Again, if you'd like to provide a public comment on this item, please raise your hand now on WebEx. If you are in the room, you can approach the front of the room to get in line when the presentation ends. And here to present on behalf of the Chief is Deputy Chief Felicia Cotton. Welcome, Ms. Cotton. We're pleased to have you here.
The department received BSCC approval on July 7th to move forward, as well as Superior Court approval per 850 of the Welfare and Institutions Code. Following that, just as an update, we moved forward. Last night, we moved 88 youth from Central Juvenile Hall. I'd like to say safely moved without incident. 88 youth from Central Juvenile Hall to Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. We had 42 staff on site, 19 plus managerial staff at the Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall site, and we had another 7 lead managerial staff at the Central Juvenile Hall. Some lessons learned. We're going to do more coordination on the sending in with the vans and some of the recourse there, but everything else went very well. No incidents with youth. We were able to get them there, shower them, feed them, and I'll get them in the room safely. Most of the units had 5 or more staff. Based on the tone and the needs of some of the units, we did place more staff in those units. Regarding the intake, the department intends to consolidate intake at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall effective July 24th. Notices have gone out to law enforcement. It started June 30th. So all law enforcement have been notified that the intake will be consolidated at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, meaning that we will not have intake at Barry J, and we will not have it at Central Juvenile Hall. We are pursuing with BSCC the opportunity to maintain the medical hub at Central Juvenile Hall until such time when we're able to have the build out at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, where we'll be able to move all of the medical appointments and medical services over to Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. What we intend to pursue is the in and out only appointments for youth, which will include dental, radiology, and some just regular appointments that youth would have from camp as well as from juvenile hall appointments. And so that's what we would be pursuing there. Again, I know there were some questions around safety at the campus. What will be different? We don't just see this as a move from one juvenile hall to the other. And I know you all don't see it that way either. And thank you for your engagement. Probation Oversight Commission, along with the county departments that are housed with us. Mental health was with us last night. We were at the site well until 11 o'clock, making sure that we had appropriate staffing. JCHS, our juvenile court health staff were there. OIG was there. Our labor unions were there. Everybody going in and out units, making sure that youth were safe, making sure that we had everything that we needed for the young people. So thank you, everybody, for the partnership, because we certainly don't do this alone, and we certainly don't view this as just a movement to another facility, but more of we understand that this is a restart. And some of the activity that occurred prior to the opening, which included the parent meeting, the interfaith groundbreaking, to really begin to have conversations with leadership about how we want to move forward, how we want to make sure that this is a place of healing where young people can grow, where we have appropriate programming. Much of that work is underway. Kevin Woods and his team have already started looking at various programming, and not just programming that we find useful, but programming that kids are telling us that's useful to them, programming that staff want to engage in, support for staff, training. We've already done a paper exercise, and we've gained many efficiencies. We do not have the staffing that we need. So I don't want to paint that picture, because we still have that as a challenge that we will continue to work towards resolving. But we have gained efficiencies where we have staffing to complete the daily necessities that our kids deserve: schooling, programming, recreational, and such. But we want to expand on that, because we don't want to just give kids the minimum. We come to this career, we really want to see kids do well. And so we really are looking at how do we use our staff more efficiently? How do we support them? How do we ensure that we have replacements so they can get the training that they need? I know we have many trainings coming up with BMP and certain other areas. I know also the question was on the table about pepper spray. There will be no pepper spray at this location. We have already collected the pepper spray for the staff that reported last night. It was either collected at Central Juvenile Hall, or if they arrived from home and had it, leadership collected that on the spot last night. So there is an effort again to move forward with that commitment. Also, the chief now has a new campus security and safety and security that will be reporting directly to his office. We have a lieutenant that is on loan to us with a long history of being able to really take a look at our operations and give us some feedback as to how we might improve and ensure that we eliminate the contraband issue that we have. He's already hit the ground running. He was with us last night as well. He's been attending meetings. He's looking at every part of the operation, already making recommendations for us to improve how we enter and exit the facility and how we ensure that we don't have contraband on site. The leadership that was on site last night contacted parents to make sure that parents knew that their children had been safely moved from one facility to the other. We wanted leadership to do that. We wanted leadership to also be a part of looking through personals to make sure that we are not bringing contraband onto the new site. So we had different teams with that responsibility. We also had teams welcoming youth and staff in the units as well. So that's how we broke up the 19 bureau chiefs down to directors, as well as our labor partners. They all assisted with that process. So we really want this to be, again, as I stated, a restart. We're going to continue. We started off again with a parent meeting back in July, and parents expressed an interest to be a part of regular conversations with leadership. At that meeting, they were able to meet every department that is going to provide services. We call them the Big Five. It's the Big Six when you add probation. That was DYD, SAPC, which is our Substance Abuse Prevention and Control, Juvenile Court Health Services, Department of Mental Health, and LACO, our education providers. We have now included the library. We intend to continue to expand that. We have a librarian that's going to be on site. We want it to be built like a community library where we have authors that come in, book clubs. We've already got a bench officer that it has volunteered to do a book club where she will come out and read with some of the kids and do some various activities. So the leadership on site, very excited about the programming, some innovative ideas coming from staff as well as from some of the other partners. Parents asked us some very challenging questions, as they should. And we, again, gave them our word that our commitment that we will be meeting with them regularly. There's a meeting scheduled for this month already. Kevin might know that date better than I think it's next week, where we will start engaging parents around hearing their voice, making sure that we are addressing their concerns. They had many that they brought to the table, and then we had dinner with them, and then we moved on from there. They were able to then mingle with the various county departments, and that's it. I'll open it up for questions from there.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Sarah, do we have any written or live public comments for item number 3?
Looking to the back to see, do we have any? Okay, we have not received any written public comment on this item. So for anyone, our virtual participants that want to comment on this item, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature. Call-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand to get in the queue. And if you are here in person, please approach the front. It looks like we have one. Okay, so we'll begin with our live public commenters, and then we'll open the floor to our remote commenters. So if you can, please state your name and begin with your comment. Do we have a clock?
What's the time?
Do you want me to, maybe I should use my stop clock? Okay, so you have 2 minutes. Just give me 1 second and I'm going to cue that up. Let's see here. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, good morning. My name is Eduardo Dumbrique, and I'm an interested party in juvenile justice. I appreciate all the changes that have been made with regard to getting a new facility and staffing it and all the work that goes into it. But it still struck me as, like you mentioned, like 11 o'clock at night. And as far as the kids and their family, which is the priority, right? The court is charged with in Welfare and Institutions Code Section 202 with maintaining family relations whenever possible, the best interests of the child, rehabilitation, and public safety. And moving the kids around in the way that they are, families being from different areas, it being harder for the families or not knowing where their kids are going to be to go visit them, I think is important. Also education, and I'm sure that there is education in place at Los Padrinos, but I'm just worrying about the quality of it, being that these children, they're in custody, and it should be a place where they can learn what they need to learn and get on track, transitioning back into the community. It's not just, I know that the contraband thing is a very serious problem, but it's not just about like searching all their stuff and making sure they don't have anything that they're not supposed to have, which would kind of seem punitive. I think it can be punitive, especially depending on the staff shortage problem. When I was in juvenile hall, and I was there when I was 11, 13, and 15, it seemed like a job in demand. It seemed like a job that had great benefits and quality staff. I felt like the staff cared about the youth. And so it's unfortunate to hear that nobody wants to work there, that there's a shortage now. And I don't know how that is solved, but however it's solved, I hope that the staff that are there do care about the children, and they act appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so that's going to conclude our live public comments. So now to our virtual attendees. No, we have no virtual attendees waiting in the queue. Okay, so let's go ahead and back to you, Vice Chair.
All right, commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Meredith.
Was he notified about this? I must have missed the memo.
The notifications went from the chief's office. I know OIG, and I was told OIG and DOJ. I'm not certain the POC was notified.
I would
And my
think,
apologies.
I
were
would think
not.
that'd be kind of important that we're notified
Yes.
since we are the oversight body here and we do the inspections, have a vested interest, because I would have been there to see that. Also, are we going to track the amount of use of force or assaults on staff or assaults on youth in the absence of pepper spray?
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll make sure that you get added to the notification list. That wasn't done.
Commissioner Mundo?
Good morning. So I have three questions. The first one, the 42 staff, any of them have restrictions, work-related restrictions?
Those were our full duty. We did have a few posts that have with work restrictions, about
Do you-
3 or 4 of those. They were not included in that number I quoted, 42.
So you had over 42 staff there then, good.
Yes.
And were some youth left at Central Juvenile Hall?
Yes, we still have approximately, as kids are coming and going. So I'm saying approximately somewhere between 90 and 100 left to
Okay.
move.
And is there a plan, because now you're stretching your staffing for 3 institutions, is there a plan to kind of mitigate any tension or extra issues that may arise from that?
Yes, Kevin and his team have put together, I think, a real good plan to mitigate that and to safely move youth. So I think, yeah, we're on
Thank you.
point with that. Thank you for your question.
Ms. Cotton, I'm going to ask that you speak into the microphone just so that we can make sure our virtual participants can hear you. And I will pass it to Commissioner Terry.
Hi, can you share more about the input that families had? What were some of their questions or maybe the recommendations they were having or concerns? And then also what programming were youth and staff recommending when you've been working with them? And then I had a follow-up question around, with there being no pepper spray, just what training has staff received to date on some of the de-escalation trainings that were supposed to be in place?
So the parents were very concerned about the education, the health. So they had many questions for LACO. They had questions for juvenile health court services. One of their questions centered around calls that they said they were receiving around their parental rights when a youth is detained and when there's medical treatment that was needed. For probation, the question centered around youth getting out for recreation and youth getting to school back and forth. So they wanted to know what we were putting in place to ensure that would be different at the site. They wanted to know how they could participate. Many of them had those questions. They want to be more included as partners. They wanted to be able to have a face-to-face connection with, and that's kind of why what informed us bringing them all together, face-to-face connection with LACO and all those that are providing services at the site. And they also were very interested in any kind of tutoring, literacy, any of those kind of programs that we could enhance at the site for young people. So that's what the majority of our time was spent around. Actually, the meeting went over an hour and a half because folks wanted to really engage. They wanted that opportunity afterwards to do some one-on-one with the agencies that were on site.
And then the de-escalation training, just any efforts around that?
So I know, and I have not been a part with the scheduling, but I know that staff receives some training, but there is a need for refresher training. Some of what we are putting in place is how do we maximize deployment where we backfill the units for staff to be able to go in groups to get trained together. So I know that is being worked through. I don't have all the details on that, but we can commit to bringing that back to you as we work again with the consultant that is with us from LASD. He's taking a look at every angle of safety and training and all those pieces for us. So I don't know if Scott has anything he wants to add to that, because I know his staff are involved as well.
No, so. Good morning. So I think Ms. Cotton covered it all. So we're basically on the same page as far as looking at use of force and giving staff the tools to be able to de-escalate when pepper spray is eliminated. So I think that's key for all of us. We're all looking at that. Safety for our staff and for our kids is paramount.
Commissioner Canales?
Thank you, Commissioner. So my question is, thank you very much for your presentation. I just caught the end of it, but I just live a few minutes away from LP, so I look forward to being more closely involved, especially with the community engagement and the families. I think this provides an excellent opportunity with location for families to be directly involved with all the transit available. And I would also like to be able for Edward Dumbricki to accompany me. He has accompanied me into several camps, and the youth took to him, 15 years old, wrongfully convicted, but yet, spending all those decades into where he is now. And so I just wanted to go on record because I have, at numerous times requested this, and I think he has respect and excellent communication and rapport with staff, but also with the incarcerated youth. And so we look forward to meeting with you, both of us. Thank you so much.
Okay, I have a handful of questions. Sorry. So you stated that families were contacted last night, at least for the 88 young people who had been brought over. I guess aside from that, the fact that young people were safe, were they notified about visitation?
Yes.
Okay.
That was a part of the script. Thank you for reminding me. We gave them a script to let them know that visiting was still 1 to 4, Saturday and Sunday, and that they were welcome to come and visit their young people. So that was a part of the.
When a few of us from leadership visited LP a few weeks back, there still had not been an identified space for visitation. Has that been designated?
The purpose room where the chapel is has been designated as one area.
How many people can fit in there safely?
Safely. And let me give you some of the other areas. Too.
Okay,
We
sure.
also have the small gym in the rear end of the campus near the
library.
girls' school and the library.
Mhm.
So we've identified some of those spaces, as well as there are some on-site patios with the nice weather that we're having. We are looking into bringing on board some canopies as well.
Somewhat, I'm sorry, canopies.
Canopies for some outdoor, certainly toward the evening, not in the sun area. I don't know the maximum capacity in the chapel offhand.
And do you have space for attorneys to visit their clients?
Yes, that space was identified. That was a part of the BSCC walkthrough.
And
We
where
have
will that
identified-
be?
It's throughout the campus, as well as there is some space, if necessary, where the court was. that we can also use that space as well because the court's not utilizing that space. So we
Okay.
have some spaces on the campus as well as that extra space
Okay.
near the court.
And then as it relates to programming, at least for these 88 young people, what is in place starting today?
Mr. Woods? The
What-
programming in place as of today.
I'm so sorry. Can we have you come up to the mic so that our virtual attendees can hear your response? Thank you. So sorry to interrupt you.
We'll have our normally scheduled recreational programming, which occurs at 3:30 p.m. That'll be a combination of outdoor recreation at 3:30, and then at 7 o'clock, we will have indoor recreation with our youth. We will consist of games and other activities.
Okay, I guess that's not really the programming I was referencing. I'm talking about, community-based organizations coming in and interacting with young folks beyond just games.
No community-based organizations will be coming in today to interact because of the transition that we're doing right now.
Do you have a
Because what-
sense of when they'll be integrated into
They will
the
be
day?
integrated into our programming next week,
Okay.
definitely.
And do you have a schedule or a list of which providers will be coming into the facility next week?
Yes, we do.
Okay, could
Yes,
you
we do.
please share that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And then as far as school goes, do you know, I know that it's only 9:30 something, but do you have a sense if young people were able to, if the 88 young folks were able to make it into the classroom today? Or if it was unit school or packets?
They would have a unit school today
Why is that?
because they were in a unit that is also self-contained.
Oh,
for
okay, so
school-
but they
for
would,
schooling, and the over at the unit N&O, they would actually transition over to the school.
okay,
that's
but
just
they
one
were,
for you.
so when you say unit school, they were still at least in a classroom that was separate from the day room?
Right, in
Okay.
those self-contained units, there are large classrooms there in the building itself.
Right,
Which they've always had school in those particular classrooms. Those youth have never made movement over into the school there at Los Padrinos.
Okay. And that to your knowledge, that happened today?
Yes, to my knowledge, it has. Yes.
And I know I think it was at the last Probation Oversight Commission meeting, there was discussion of Narcan and the fact that not every staff member had access to Narcan, and that might have been specific to Barry J. And I know that none of the Barry J pre-dispo youth have been transitioned to LP, but are the LP staff going to have access to Narcan? Do they have access to Narcan? What's the status or data on that?
96% of the staff at Los Padrinos have been issued Narcan. The numbers that I gave you last time at Barry J have increased significantly. If you remember, those were in, I believe I said 42%. Those are now at 92%. And it might be a little bit above that as of today. That was last Friday. They were at 92%. So they've significantly increased. Almost all of the staff have received Narcan training as well as been issued Narcan. So Narcan is readily available throughout the facility.
And as far as staffing today, do you know, I know that there were 42 staff there last night, but today, do we know how many staff showed up?
I don't have the number offhand of how many staff showed up as of yet, no.
And I think, I can't remember actually if Commissioner Terry asked this question. This is related to programming. I believe, Ms. Cotton, you stated that young people were asked, what it is that they wanted by way of programming. I can't remember if you shared the response to that.
Some of the feedback we received, of course, vocational training. Barber school is really popular with the young men. They want some kids ask for DJ, radio, various vocational activities that they could be involved in. Some actually ask for reading and books, library. We have some great consumers of that, so we'll be able to achieve that through the library program. So those were some of the various programs that they ask about.
Has there been any movement related to implementing, whether it was like a barber training or some of the vocational requests
I
related
know
to?
that is something that we are, how we can bring that on site and how we can get, especially at the SRTF or for the kids that are there for longer term. I know Scott's team, we are working to look and see how we can bring that on board as one of the vocational certificated programs that young people can leave with.
But it's still, it's still in process.
Yeah, we need to, we really need to figure out about the certification. They're gonna have much more real estate when we move out. And so I know Scott's looking at what vocational programs he wants to bring on board and how we bring them on board. So it is moving, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay. And then my last question was related to the campus safety and security. I don't know if it's like a department or a unit that you
It's
mentioned.
gonna be a unit that's gonna be a direct report to the chief's office.
What do they do? What are their responsibilities? Or I didn't fully
We're gonna
understand.
ensure that we have safety protocols in place to make sure we're following them, to make sure our policies are satisfactory, to ensure safety for staff and youth. Looking at probably how we come in and out of the facility, some of the practices around that were not up to speed. And so improving that part of it so that we can make sure that the campus stays drug-free and safe.
Okay. And you said that there's a lieutenant on loan. Is that a
Yes.
lieutenant from where?
LASD.
Okay. And what is, they're connected to the campus safety and security?
Yes, they're
Okay.
gonna, he's gonna be providing, insight to that team that'll be responsible, for the oversight of improving and enhancing our security efforts around the campus.
And is that person interacting directly with young people?
Mainly interacting with staff.
Okay. Okay, I don't know that I have any other questions. Yes, Commissioner Garcia Leyes?
Thanks. So I think I just want to fill in some of the questions after our vice chairs that still remain. But first, especially for the public who's never been to Los Padrinos, when we talk about these self-contained units, I believe there's 8 of these units, and they're a combination of sleeping quarters, a day room, and 2 classroom multi-purpose rooms. I don't love the idea of kids not ever seeing sunlight because they don't have any reason to leave these self-contained units. But I think it's still, in the short term, preferable to not having enough staff to move them to their classrooms. So I'm glad that the classrooms are inside. Are they full? Are we only using those? What units have we actually moved these kids into so far?
Thus far, we've actually moved them into our S, and also we're moving them into, I believe it's XY. I'd have to get my list there.
Yeah. X, Y, N, and
Yes,
O,
yeah.
and we used half of unit G, I'm sorry, and GH.
Okay, those aren't all the self-contained ones. Am I right? X and Y are.
X and Y are.
X and Y are self-contained.
So,
Right.
so the other ones involve moving youth to classrooms.
Yes.
Okay.
N and O, definitely N and O
And H.
and H.
And do we know if that happened today?
No, but I would always get a phone call if we didn't have movements to the school.
Okay, so
Or
we
if
think
they-
it might have happened.
Yes, I believe it would have happened, yes.
Okay. Have young women been moved, or are they still at Central? I remember the.
Not as of yet, no.
Okay. So it's all young men. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else to help visualize where we're at right now. So LACO is there. How many classrooms? Do we know about how many classrooms are open at this point?
I don't know the number of classrooms that are open, no.
Okay.
But there will be enough classrooms open to accommodate the number of youth that are presently there at the facility for sure.
Okay. So I don't expect you to be able to tell me questions about how many teachers are
No.
credentialed, how many subs are, all of those yet. So we'll have to come back and check on that. Which I forgot the first thing I was going to say. Congratulations. This is a huge, huge thing that you've accomplished. Reopening Los Padrinos, getting it approved, and moving youth and staff. That's tremendous.
Thank you.
Okay. Medical. So Central is going to continue to be used for a while as an in and out medical center. And that's because the medical unit is not ready to go at Los Padrinos? Is that what I heard, or did I get that wrong?
We do have a medical unit there, but we want to expand to one of the other areas. I don't know if you're familiar with that Unit J that's kind of on the back side of the campus, where we believe that it would be a good opportunity to expand from intake. You can go right from intake to that unit to house young people that need to be in that medical unit. It also will allow us to get dentistry and some of the other things together. We initially thought we needed a lead room, but we're finding that we might be able to do some mobile radiology units, and that might be more efficient. So it's given us all an opportunity to look at a better way and to modernize that area so that youth get the best care that we can provide.
All right, so am I understanding the idea is to eventually have the ideal medical facility at Los Padrinos, and that we're using East Lake to make sure that we can serve the needs of the youth we have while we build that, I don't want to state of the art, but ideal medical center?
Yes.
Okay. That sounds like a good plan to me.
Yes, so I don't want to say state of the art or
Yeah.
overstate for JCHS, but yes, it is to improve what we're providing to young people.
Credible messengers. Are they there yet? Will they be there soon?
So DYD is on board, and it is one of the partners that has been meeting with us weekly and has been a part of the planning. Their next move is to have programming for the young women as well as for our gender expansive. We believe that they'll be positioned to start that next month, but they have office space and they have already moved into some of their staff on site.
Okay, I'm having trouble visualizing this. That there are staff on site, but there are not credible messengers on site yet?
Well, no, let me say this. Some of the credible messengers will be assisting us with the transition from Barry J, because they're already engaged with those young people. But as far as a presence, a regular presence on the campus, we anticipate that that will start with the young women based on our planning and based on conversations. So we did want to make space for them to be able to come on site and continue to work with those young people that are coming from Barry J, as well as for them to get familiar with the campus and be a part of the planning as we move forward.
Okay, so credible messengers will begin regularly being part of the Los Padrinos community when the young women are moved, ramping up to in about a month, we should expect to see them fully integrated.
Fully integrated, yes,
Okay.
but we will have some on board. Again, like I said, with the Barry J, they're going to help us with that transition as well.
Okay. At our last meeting, at a meeting, I don't know, 6 months ago, there was a lot of talk about the scanner and the technology and the kinds of scanners that would be used. And we all dreamed that there would be new scanners at Los Padrinos. Has that happened?
New scanners, as far as the ones we referred to at the last meeting, definitely not. But we are in the process of attempting to get airport-style scanners.
Okay.
And I spoke with our new security consultant yesterday, and they are in the process of trying to get that scanner where we have it set up in a intake area where every youth coming into the facility will be screened. If we need to have rescreening of any youth in the facility for any particular purposes, like if they're suspected of, strongly suspected of having any type of contraband, we can take them right back into that same area and rescreen them once again. So we are definitely in the process of trying to get that airport-style screener that will help us greatly eliminate or greatly decrease contraband coming into our facilities. You know, as you know, even with airport-type screeners, sometimes people get contraband on the planes even. So, but it will greatly increase our ability to eliminate contraband. So
Were the youth searched last night before being moved?
they were searched before being moved, and they were searched upon arrival to the facility. And their personals were searched before, and their personals were also researched upon arrival at Los Padrinos.
Then my one remaining question regards the medical unit at Central. So my understanding of the Welfare Institution Code says that no youth can be confined at Central after July 24th unless the BSCC agrees that the problems that led to the unsuitability have been remedied. I imagine that might not be difficult to do if there's no, if all that's happening are in and outs, then I imagine there are enough staff to cover that. And that was the source of most of the problems. And I don't remember any complaints about the medical unit in particular at Central. But I know that in all of the complications that some of these things have been skipped. Has BSCC approved of the use of Central, and is that approval in writing?
We have not received approval.
Are there plans to do that? Have you talked to the BSC about that?
Yes, we are pursuing it.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Commissioner Meredith?
Just have a follow-up comment on the scanners. The idea of the scanners is scanning the youth coming from the facility, got that. But it's also for visitors, staff, commissioners, anybody coming to that facility is supposed to be scanned. So I just wanted to clarify, it's not just for the youth, it's for everybody. There is funding available. I checked on that.
Oh, good.
Sorry, I have two follow-up questions. You stated that young people were searched kind of before leaving, their belongings were searched. Upon arrival, they were searched, their belongings were searched. What about staff?
Staff searched?
I mean, were they screened? Were they, yeah.
They were screened, definitely, yes.
I mean, we heard some issues related to the screening of staff kind of not that long ago. So.
Are you referring to them coming through our screening and putting their meals atop the X-ray machines?
Meals, items, I don't, who knows?
Yeah, I think
but-
the screening process will be better enforced at Los Padrinos than maybe it might have been in the past. It will definitely be better enforced. So everybody coming through will definitely be screened. We'll have as we did before, we're going to have to expand the time period where we actually have a supervisor or a director present during the shift exchanges to ensure that staff coming through are thoroughly screened.
So you're saying will be, I'm talking about last night.
Last night they were screened as well. Those that didn't come via the trams and buses, not buses, trams and vans. Those that didn't come via trams and vans, anybody coming through the front of the facility was definitely screened.
I guess I don't understand why we make this distinction then, right? If young people were searched before they left, and then when they arrived, and maybe, or at least screened, I don't know why we wouldn't screen the adults also.
I don't think that would be a process that would be utilized in any facility across the nation to screen your staff that are doing the actual transport of the youth to a facility. That anybody coming from, they wouldn't be considered already sterilely screened, but they actually were screened at Central facility, the staff that actually were doing the transports. They wouldn't go through a rescreening, I don't think, anywhere in the country at any facility. However, all new staff coming on shift were definitely screened coming in.
With all due respect, Mr. Woods, if we're talking about anywhere in the country, I don't know how many other facilities in the country have been repeatedly determined to be unsuitable for the confinement of youth. I don't know how many other facilities in the country where young people are dying because they're overdosing due to access to illicit substances. I don't know where we have other facilities in the country where young people are being hospitalized because they have access to illicit substances. So this is a bit of an emergency, and sometimes we have to take extra precautions when we know that there are real concerns about young people having access to contraband and surviving.
No, you're absolutely right about that. However, the screening of our staff that were doing the transports, that definitely did not happen.
Okay. And then my last question was related to a timeline. So I guess in theory, Central and Barry J should no longer be housing pre-dispo youth after July 23rd. Is there a timeline for all young people to be moved by July 23rd, or are we kind of ignoring that timeline given that there's only 20 days left?
We're not ignoring the timeline, and we do intend to have all the youth at Los Padrinos, the predisposition youth, at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall by the deadline. We will meet that deadline.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Terry, or Commissioner Terry, sorry.
Just a quick follow-up question. So for organizations who might already be able to provide like some of the services the youth are wanting or that staff are recommending or the books, like how can folks get in there? Because I think there's people who could probably get started on some of that now. So what's the process for getting in? Like I know there's organizations here today who provide some of these services. Some of us have connections. We could get resources for that library. So how do we get in there?
Have to have them to register in our county web bin so that they could become one of the vendors that when we open up an RFP for services, because again, we have to follow the county process. We do have an expedited process that allows us to, that shortens the time, the master services agreement. So once they become identified as a contractor on that master services agreement, our time is accelerated that we reward that the contracts are awarded. So if we have folks that are interested, our contract section, we can also have them to come. Again, I think they have been here before, but certainly I think it's worthwhile having them to come back. But it takes little to no time to get them registered. I think within 24 hours we can get them registered.
Commissioner Mundo, did you have a question?
I just need a clarification. The transporting staff, did they remain as part of the 42 that continue to work that evening?
No,
So they basically would have just dropped the kids off and not entered.
and many of them didn't enter. They stood and the staff on site received the youth.
Got it.
So they did not enter the units.
Commissioner Canales?
Yes, thank you. Bringing back the issue of the body scanners and the dogs and everything, and I think this commission voted on it unanimously with an increase in budget to be able to provide dogs and body scanners. But I was also wondering, I know Kruti with the Youth Justice Coalition has been looking into restorative practices with youth out here because of the fentanyl problem. And so, while I do not see dogs and body scanners as a solution, I also do not want anybody to die. So I did vote yes, but I don't see that as a long-term solution. And also when California Department of Corrections brought in the airport scanners, they were filed with several lawsuits, which I have copies of them. So I'm just wondering now if if there will be some kind of lawsuits filed about airport body scanners for the youth. Statement.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry, just two last questions that came up. You stated that programming will, in theory, resume next week. Were CBOs provided notice of the transfer of young folks? I'm assuming all of those young folks were from specific units, and units were moved kind of together. So community-based
Yes.
organizations were notified?
CBOs are aware of the movement, yes.
Of
They're aware the
those-
movement was occurring. They were not privy to what dates and times we're going to be moving youth.
Right, so I guess if there was I'm not sure which unit was moved from Central yesterday, but if that unit was scheduled to have a community-based organization present today to provide programming, will they be notified that you don't need to come or that you should be coming to LP next week?
They were already notified, right, that they shouldn't be coming or they can come next week.
Okay, so then community-based organizations will be able to continue working with the young people that they were working with previously?
Definitely.
Okay. I think that we have one virtual commenter who may have raised their hands after we began our discussion. So we can quickly go to that comment and then we will move along the agenda. If that's okay.
Crystal Jones for Crystal Clear Learning Foundation. Just curious to find out, is the Los Padrinos location a more supervised location with more trained staff, or the same staff is the supervisors of our youth incarcerated at this location? The next comment is, will we as community stakeholders be able to join in and partner with the unspent funds? And who are these CBOs that will be offering the programs for the girls and youth? How are they intentionally improving the well-being for our youth? Radio, DJ, barber school, Ms. Cotton shared were some of the feedback. My question is, what are the goals of these youths? I cannot settle to see all the youth housed only school and radio. How do we get more feedback on career-based skills and training to be equipped to succeed? For example, resume building, job skills, cosmetology, nursing, co-powering about the options of success and the types of training available at their ages. Nursing school, types of college and high school courses where they could be enrolled at the same time while they're incarcerated to actually help them be better individuals and humans once they come back into the community society while they're incarcerated in these disciplined locations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment, Vice Chair.
Okay, now we will proceed with agenda item number 4, where we will discuss and take appropriate action on updates from the Probation Department on progress that has been made on the board motions calling for structured release and girls' decarceration, which intended to reduce the population of incarcerated youth in the county. Director Sharon Harada is here to share the progress so far, and please take a look at the data the department provided, which is attached to the agenda. If you'd like, it's okay. If you'd like to provide a public comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand now on WebEx. And if you're in the room, you can approach the front of the room to get online when the presentation ends. Ms. Harada, the floor is yours.
Good morning to the Probation Oversight Commissioners. Thank you very much for this opportunity to provide an update on a motion that was passed by our Board of Supervisors on March 21st, 2023. This board motion was entitled Ensuring the Use of Least Restricted Placements for Young People in the Probation Department's Care and Custody. It also asked us to consider certain groups of young people to focus on, but was not limited to: youth incarcerated on the basis of a technical violation, misdemeanor, or non-707B or serious felony, youth awaiting suitable placement, especially though any young person who has waited more than 30 days to be released, incarcerated because they do not have a family or home, within 60 days of their release date for those who have received their disposition, and able to be safely released into one of the least restrictive options, including but not limited to Pine Grove, Dorothy Kirby Center, the Community Detention Program, or supportive housing, youth who are performing well in programming, or other groups of youth who may be appropriate for release as they await adjudication or early release after receiving their disposition. So our partners, we agreed that we would name ourselves a Juvenile Justice Collaborative Team, and we're required to meet weekly for these youth and consider these population groupings to see if we can support and move forward on early release or release from juvenile hall. In our collaborative team, it includes the public defender, the alternate public defender, the independent, the IDP or IJDP, DMH, OIG, and other stakeholders as identified by the attorneys. Because our first grouping that we prioritize, we're looking at pre-adjudicated youth, because that grouping of youth is the largest that are in our juvenile halls. So on April 3rd, we ran some data for that grouping, and there were 54 youth spread across the defender attorney groups. And of those 54 youth who were incarcerated for non-707B felonies, misdemeanors, or technical violations in juvenile hall, by gender, there were 47 male and 7 female. Ethnicity for the males, 58% or 27 were Hispanic, and 36% or 17 were Black. Of the 7 females, 3 or 43% were Hispanic, 3 or 43% were Black, and 1 or 14% were white. By age, for the males, 10 or 21% were between the ages of 13 and 15. 34 or 72% were between the ages of 16 and 17, and 3 or 7% were 18.
And for the females, 2 or 29% were between the ages, and when I say ages, it's at the time that they were detained, were between 12 and 15 years, and 5 or 71% were between the ages of 16 and 17. Of these 54 youth, 37 or 69% have been released as of a few days ago, and 17 remain detained. Of those 54, 33 or 89% of the males that were released were in 4 or 11% of the females, so 4 of 7 females. Also of the 54 youth, for our collaborative team meetings, which we hold weekly, 11 or 92% of the 54 we had team meetings for, and were male, and 1 or 8% were female. So that was our starting population, which we tried to set up as a benchmark. And as of that date, then we provided additional data to the defender groups, OIG, the district attorney, and if the youth was a crossover youth, we also provided individual data to DCFS and the Young Persons Dependency Attorney, or CLC. Since, as of July 12th, we have had 32 team meetings. 37 were scheduled, however, 5 were either canceled or rescheduled. Of the 34 youth, I'm sorry, 32 youth, 23 or 72% were released and 9 still remain detained. Of the 9 that remain detained, 5 youth have crossover youth involvement, which means that they are also under the supervision of the Department of Children and Family Services. One of those youth is pending regional center placement. And 3 youth were found incompetent to stand trial and are receiving remediation services in juvenile hall for the competency protocol under juvenile court. 2 of those 3 are crossover youth. 1 youth who is pending court and still detained, has a home on probation recommendation from probation. 1 youth is pending an additional case from another county, and 1 youth is pending regional center assessment. So that is kind of a general overview. Also, of the 32 youth, we will provide additional information in our board response in about 2 weeks, but 10 of the 32 youth were represented by IJD, 1 by an IJD who then became a private attorney, 12 by the APD, and 9 by the public defender. And of those 32 youth, 15 of them were youth who are new to the system, who have not been on probation, not currently on probation, and 17 were currently on probation and received another arrest. So I'll stop there for questions and then go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harada. Sarah, do we have any written or live public comments for item number 4?
No, we haven't received any written comment for this item. If virtual participants would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand to get in the queue using your raise your hand feature. For our call-in users, just a reminder, please dial *3 to raise your hand. And of course, if you're here in person, please come to the front at this time. No in-person commenters. Do we have any remote?
We
Okay.
have 2. We're going to start with James Maddox. James, we've sent you a request.
Jennifer, are you timing it? Do you want me to time it?
It is a concern of mine that children 12 to 17 are not called children. We call them young adults, young women, young men, and then the obfuscation term seems to be youth. Call them what they are. 12 to 17-year-olds are children. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Next, we have Crystal Jones.
Referencing the structure release in girls' decarceration, I'm asking as an advocate and an indigenous parent if we could give them real life experiences and opportunities, as well as discipline of correction, to learn of their mistakes and how to build resilience towards these peer pressures and be self-resilient to choose better informed choices. Youth of guidance to know we do not keep them bound to their mistakes, but we are here to take them by the hand and help them improve to be released better as a person and citizen returning into the community. Due to the harm of our youth in these care discipline facilities, we should require this. We should require them to have these type of trainings, as well as not be treated as criminals, where if the staff is not treated the same way as the youth should be treated the same way too, or different devices of harm. Seems like the staff were harming the youth, so how are we ensuring intentionally and strategically that these staff do not no longer harm these youth or not a discouragement to the youth while in our care? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Just as a reminder, we are on item number 4, which is looking at the data related to MDTs and decarceration of youth. Okay, Vice Chair?
Okay, if there's no more public comment, commissioners, do you have any questions or comment? Yes, Commissioner Mundo.
So when the motion was passed, I was a little disappointed that 707B offenses weren't included and didn't think that there would be much room. And when I see that it was 54, and I think about the pop back then, that represents 20% of the of those waiting pre-dispo. So when I looked at the last data that probation shared, I came to the conclusion that they were doing a good job in the front end on the intake of just dissuading unnecessary intake. So trying to understand this population, the first question is, what percentage of these youth were warrants? And I don't need an exact number, but I'm assuming that a lot of these youth that came in that were non-707Bs had to be warrants or suitable placement type youth.
I will have to follow up. I didn't bring the data on warrants, and then I'll be sure to include that on our response. I also did want to say that that was the population we chose to prioritize, but the attorney groups are the ones that choose the cases, and they have brought some 707B, youth with a 707B charge to these juvenile justice collaborative team meetings, especially those who, because we recommended, that we take a look at those pending the competency process. Because if a youth doesn't attain competency, the court is going to dismiss the petition. So we wanted to support the release of as many of those youth as possible, given options to the court. So there were some of those youth that the attorneys did bring forward and that we have met on. I'll have to be specific on the releases because I just talked about a general group of releases. I didn't go into what groupings they actually came under with regards to what the board asked us to look at, as well as the 707 youth with some 707B charges. But we did include some. And then the attorneys also, because this is pre-adjudication, just for the commissioners to know, the attorneys wanted to be the ones to bring the cases forward and choose them. And so we also do try to balance it out on a given week. So if there are 20 cases that the attorney groups, and I'm exaggerating, but just for instance, then we would try to choose an equal amount per attorney group for that week and schedule as many as possible. So we're trying to work together as quickly as possible to have these meetings, as well as work with the attorney groups. And then they also made the decision that they would be the ones to bring any other stakeholders to the meetings, since it's a pre-adjudicated youth, for those who are pre-adjudication.
Okay. And these are just general. I'm just trying to understand this population, so I don't need exact numbers. So of the youth that were released, how many were already scheduled to be released?
For pre-adjudication with the recommendation?
No, because the part of the group that was on the motion were those waiting for placement and those waiting for camps or things of that nature. So were any of these 37 part of that number?
Yes, there are a few of them, but mostly they were pre-adjudication. So where we could, some of the young people who were still detained, IDC had recommended CDP for the detention arraignment hearing. So of course we would not oppose, and we supported the release of the young person. And sometimes they were released, and sometimes the court had a reason for detention or wanted additional information. So it went both ways. So I really do want to provide additional information for our board response, so I'm going to take that down. So thank
Actually,
you.
you led into my next question. It was going to be how many of those youth actually did have recommendations of release at the detention hearing, or how many had detention recommendations and were released. But actually, that doesn't make sense. So let me backtrack on that. The next question I have, and it'll be one of the last. What was the average days of detention of the youth that were wreleased? I mean, were they coming on their 15-day and we were able to jump on that? Or was it on their 30th day, or are we into our 50th day of detention?
You know, I don't have the average with me, but that's a very good question. So we will include that as well. But there was a range. Some young people, it was very close to their detention date, you know, and right after detention arraignment hearing. And some young people were quite a few days out for whatever reason the court chose to order continued detention. So it was a range.
So, and my last question is, I'm hoping that they were connected to services as they were released. Is there a tracking, are we going to track those to see if they stay released?
For the young people who remain on probation or are ordered probation, we are definitely doing, we had a setup or follow-up already set up for when they did get released, because right, we're meeting and then they may have a court date a week out or a week and a half out or whatever that is. So that we contacted through the chain of command, the DPO of record to make sure that some of the discussion about the resources available were made available to them. So some of the youth who were not on probation, who were new, and this was their first offense, we would be offering some services mainly through the attorney. And then a group of the young people actually were regional center clients or were pending regional center client evaluation by the regional center, so that in order to try to support the speeding up of receiving services or looking at a possible regional center placement instead of suitable placement, et cetera, and to have those options for the bench officer or the judge, I did contact public counsel, who's one of the attorney groups in LA County who specializes in regional center services, and they have helped us in the past really speed up evaluation because they know the system so well. So we, of 6 of these youth, we contacted public counsel directly and asked them to connect to the lawyer. You know, we didn't have to be involved, so that the lawyer could explain the case and then hopefully expedite whatever referral timeline or service or placement that everybody was looking at, or they had mentioned that they were going to start, so that we could move that release date as quickly as possible and provide that option to the judge.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Commissioner Terry?
Hi, so what's happening with the 4, I believe it's 4 crossover youth who are remaining? I know one, I'm having a little bit of trouble following the bullets because the
Sorry.
numbers change. No, it's a recommendation to, I think there's a way to present the data, because we kind of start with the 54 youth and then it's hard to follow what's happening with each group of the youth. So that's just a recommendation for the next report. But I believe there's 4 crossover youth. One is pending regional center placement, but there's 4 remaining. So what's the kind of the plan for those youth?
So I remember 2 specifically. One, when we did have our collaborative team meeting on that one female who's very young, at the time of the meeting itself, so I don't remember exactly how many days that she had been in juvenile hall already, DCFS, who has wardship, had explored between at least 20 to 30 STRTP options for the young person and had not yet found a placement. And they were continuing to do so in collaboration with CLC. And I believe CLC has, it's not the same as the psychiatric social workers for the public defender's office, but they do have social workers that also are assigned to the young person, who were really making all these efforts. So we were going through all the partner agencies and what the efforts were. So at least 2 or 3 out of the 4 had the placement options were being expeditiously explored, and there had not been an acceptance. And so We were looking, one of the young people, we also contacted public counsel to see about regional centers. So there's a lot of that data. I think I'm going to have to figure out how to not be identifiable, but summarize in a way of the efforts, because there had been so much done, even CLC, Children's Law Center, and their social workers that work with them had done additional efforts. And so, we really try, and then probation tries to assist or support DCFS however we can. It was just difficult that an STRTP had not accepted the young person. And there was some other CSEC involvement and things that I believe, the bench was concerned about just release. And the parental piece was not as available as we all would want. So I will provide more information in a way that I can make it general enough that it's aggregate on the board response, and then hopefully that'll answer some of the additional detailed questions.
Okay, and then just to clarify, so this data, I think you said, was run in April, and then some of it is covering July. So is this the most current data, or will we see more updated data
So
soon?
for the 32, it's as of this week, the 32 meetings. So the 54 was a starting point to look at pre-adjudication youth. And in the response to the board, we will make the connections, because every week youth were released through the regular process and sometimes in support through this collaborative team process, right? And then youth were detained. So then each defender, each attorney group were keeping track of the young people they were representing in these groups. And then we were confirming new arrests or new detentions. And then they were tracking that and weighing in on which young people they believed they wanted to schedule for these weekly meetings.
Commissioner Garcia-Lace?
Hi, I think it's just me because Commissioner Mundo seems to be following all these numbers really well, but I get a little lost on the second page of the report where it talks about there have been 12 youth identified for team meetings. Okay, what are these team meetings? These must not be the MDT team meetings.
Well,
that
we
are-
don't, they are. We
Okay.
call them our team meetings. Okay, this is the reason. What happened was the first couple of weeks, we called them MDT discussions. Because really the MDT is at the ground level with the youth, the family, all the partners, the attorney of record, if they're able to make it, some service providers, if it's applicable and however that works, and probation, right? But those are true MDTs. We were having discussions because it's really high level. And what happened was some of the courts thought we were having a second MDT that they didn't know about. So we all of us decided to call our process juvenile justice collaborative team meetings to not confuse it with regular MDTs. So what I was saying is, one of the questions that had come up previously in another discussion is, of the first 54, how many youth did have a team meeting scheduled? So I just wanted to report out on that. And then the other question was, how many total team meetings have you had? Not just of the beginning 54, but in totality as youth have come in and gone out. And we actually have had 32 meetings in total. So I'm sorry, it is a break there. I have to add the youth coming in and out in a flow, and then end up with a 32. It could be more by the time we respond to the board.
So what's the 12?
So the 12 of the 54 first group of data, the first data we ran, we had 12 team meetings. So 12 youth had team meetings of the 54.
And that's April numbers or July numbers?
That was the April numbers.
Okay.
At the beginning.
Now, so you had 12 meetings, but it says 37 were released.
So another question that was posed to us was, of the first 54, how many youth were released in general?
Right.
So we gave a total of number of releases, because that was a question that came to us.
Okay. So am I right? So I understand this is 25 of the 54 were released without going through this process? Or no,
Yes,
without going through the
yes,
process, regardless
yes,
of the process? No, I
yes,
guess if they didn't have meetings, it was without being part of the process. Okay,
Correct.
and now I understand. Okay. Okay. So this is an intensive process. I mean, when we first talked about this, I had sort of imagined it really having an impact in total number of youth. It's not having a substantial impact. I'm sure it's important for all the youth who are being released, but this isn't bringing down our numbers in big ways, at least not the way I imagined. Should we expect these numbers to continue, or is this something that will ramp up over time or dwindle?
You know, what we found, and I mentioned it in the kind of mid-page, was in talking to our attorney partners, right? The overall youth releases were really a collaborative effort, not just, but a lot of it is on the ground level where the attorney groups are working to advocate, you know, expeditiously. Sometimes on our council meetings, some of the meetings, you know, the attorney would go into court a few days earlier, and then the young person would get released and we would cancel the meeting, right? So they're always at work and they're working with the DA. We have recommended release as well. So that's part of the process. And then these collaborative team meetings have supported all of that, sometimes added additional resources. But I hear you. It's hard to say that, you know, the numbers will go up or down. We hope we continue to do the work on all levels, and that the youth who can be safely released will be released back into the community, or to an STRTP, or to another, like, you know, Pine Grove, or placement, or whatever that is.
Okay. I mean, the numbers that are released after having the team meetings is pretty high. The percentage that are released, it's impressive. But it also seems to suggest to me that there are a lot of youth who are incarcerated who don't need to be incarcerated. So I'm glad this is happening. I'm hoping that this is some sort of pilot program that we can build on, and get the courts to see that the judges are ordering detention more often than they need to. Which brings up to me a second concern, which is, you know, I think people see me and maybe this commission as a whole as being particularly concerned with the rights of juveniles and civil rights, but I actually consider public safety my number one concern. And to that end, what I want to see happen is the release of as many youth as possible, to the point where we have to worry about recidivism. So do we know, or are we tracking whether or not the people who are released through this process are rearrested within a certain time frame of
We
their
are
release?
looking at that, and we want to include that in our response to the board as of that date. So
Great, thank you.
Yes.
That's important. I
Mhm.
appreciate that.
Do you have a follow-up question, Commissioner
Yeah,
Munda?
you know, it strikes me that for some of these youth, especially that are arrested leading into the weekend, and knowing the time frame, the 72 hours, not including the weekend, is it possible to consider having this model at a smaller level on the front end before the intake report is completed? So the recommendation comes as a collaborative recommendation. So if somebody's arrested Friday after 12 o'clock, they're not going to go to court until Tuesday or Wednesday, which means that gives you a Monday to have a small, quick strike team gather and talk about a kid who basically is at the recommendation part of detention. And if it's a 707B offense, that's not an assault, or it's not a weapons charge, which a lot of them are, it just strikes me that you would avoid the detention altogether and give the bench officer a lot more to deal with on the front end than 30 days, 40 days into a detention. So I just wonder if, when you guys meet, if you can just kind of consider that as a possibility, since the group is already working together.
I just want to say that for myself, I have observed that IDC does a very good job with recommending release for every young person they believe, and citing out or using community detention and releasing prior to. so that the young person doesn't have to be detained over that time period. So I think that, I mean, that's a tough one. I'll make a note of it.
I guess we would know that if the data we had requested for IDC intake had been provided, then I would know that. I would know what their detentions are, but I don't. And I hope by year's end that the department will provide that for me, so I won't ask questions like this and question the integrity of the intake unit, which I do believe they're doing a good job, but I also believe in optics. I know that a lot of the staff that are currently employed are afraid to recommend release or CDP and just want to kick the can down the road. I know that. I've worked in the unit for 10 years. And so I just think that having another set of eyes on the front end gives the judge a little more opportunity to make a more appropriate decision. So just my 2 cents.
Commissioner Garcia-Leyes?
Thank you. That makes me think of a question that I don't know why I didn't realize or asked this before. So looking just at the 23 number that were released, how many of those 23 did probation recommend detention at their intake?
So we'll take a look at that.
We're not sure.
Pardon me?
We're not sure. So to some degree, we may be undoing with this process actions that we did on intake.
Well, and what happens is at intake, it might be a higher level charge than what the district attorney files, right? By the time the young person gets to detention arraignment. So say it's a 245B2, I believe that's 707B, and then they file 242, which is a battery that could be a misdemeanor low-level felony. So then there's 2 different groups of data that we would need to look at to make sure that, you know, to kind of look at what you're saying. Because it's not always, the DA does not always file what law enforcement actually charges and what we're detaining for at IDC.
So yeah, I'm not interested in, I don't know, criticizing our intake and the recommendations as being, you know, overly punitive or something like that. What I'm trying to think is, is this process identifying opportunities to change or improve our intake process? And I think you've just pointed one out, which is that maybe we should be more critical of the charges that police departments put on the paperwork when they bring the kids in. And if there's some way that we can be more cynical about what police officers think are appropriate charges compared to what the district attorney's office think are appropriate charges, that might be able to, you know, to make the kind of changes that we're hoping to see. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
So my colleague didn't read the article I wrote about booking or the imprint, but let me just clarify that when a youth is arrested and booked with the 707B, all that requires is that the youth be brought before a judge. It doesn't do anything to dissuade probation at that court hearing from recommending release or detention on house arrest. So whether or not the DA files lower or higher, what really is determined is what was the youth's behavior in the offense and what are the factors of his social makeup. So you can have a youth who commits a serious offense, but has a good makeup at home and be released because they don't have bail. So probation still has the opportunity, even on a warrant, to recommend release or anything less than detention. So, you know, that said, that's why it's important to do it on the front end. And again, I say optics. A lot of youth are not released because of the optics of it. Judges won't release youth that should be released because of the optics. And that can be actually mitigated if you do it on the front end.
Okay, so I just have two questions and then we need to wrap this up because I know Ms. Harada also has to leave and also is holding an upcoming agenda item. It would be great if we could see data on how many young people probation actually intended to release all on their own. Because I think the real question here for me is how many of these young people didn't need to be incarcerated in the first place? Any separation a young person has from their home, any contact, whether it's an hour, whether it's 3 days that a young person has with law enforcement is harmful, right? Any period of time that a young person is caged is harmful. So it's, if, you know, even 20 of these young people never needed to be incarcerated in the first place. I think that's like an important thing for us to think about. The other thing that I noticed that was missing from all of this was there's really no response to the December motion from Supervisor Solis on the girls and gender expansive youth decarceration. That was, I know, a process that was held by the public defender where there were these transitional MDTs. We know that our incarcerated, at least girls population, has kind of increased from where it was when that motion was first filed, but there's nothing about what's being done. And it is still a fairly small population. It is, I think, under 50 young people between Dorothy Kirby and Central Juvenile Hall, or soon to be LP. But even if we were to start with the young women and gender expansive youth, for whom there is absolutely no data, right? We don't get any breakdown in terms of who qualifies or who identifies as a gender expansive young person, which feels wildly problematic to me, as we like erase their kind of existence. But it would be really helpful to know what's being done for this smaller population in hopes of having it kind of extend to the boys. But yes, Commissioner Meredith.
Just for the record, neither law enforcement or probation cage anybody. We might incarcerate them into a detention facility, but they're not caged.
We can have a difference of opinion, but we do need to wrap up and move to the next agenda item, which I believe is agenda item 7. Okay. So agenda item 7 is to discuss and take appropriate action about the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, or JJCC, the recent report back on unspent funds, which is attached to today's agenda, and the frequency of meetings. The reason we have this on the agenda is concern about probation's capacity to hold the JJCC meetings and subcommittee meetings with the needed frequency, and concerns about the $92 million in reported unspent funds in the report back and the need to finalize the spending plan for the SYTF funds through the JJRBG subcommittee. We are glad to see that there is a JJRBG subcommittee meeting happening tomorrow, but Ms. Harada, can you please talk us through what the struggles have been to get these meetings scheduled and what the plan is to spend down the funds or any obstacles to spending the funds? We have heard that one of the obstacles relates to probation wanting to collect personally kind of like identifiable data as it relates to young people from community-based organizations, and attached to today's agenda is a memo about that issue, if you would like to address that as well. Members of the public, if you'd like to provide a public comment on this item, please raise your hand now on WebEx. If you are in the room, you can approach the front of the room to get online when the presentation ends. Thank you, Ms. Harada, and please proceed.
Thank you. So first, I wanted to cover the part of the agenda item that relates to the JJCC, or Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, and its related subcommittee meetings. I actually assumed responsibility as the chair of JJCC in mid-April. And since mid-April, I've chaired 13 meetings, not counting the one that's scheduled for tomorrow. So I'll break them down just for informational purposes. We've had 4 JJCC Governance and Procedure Ad Hoc Subcommittee meetings. We've had 3 JJCC CMJJP, which is the Comprehensive Multi-Agency Juvenile Justice Plan Ad Hoc Subcommittee meetings. We've had 3 JJCC Data Ad Hoc Subcommittees meetings. We've had 1 JJRBG meeting, which was virtual. And then we've had 2 JJCC, JJRBG Spending Plan Ad Hoc Subcommittee meetings. So that's 13 meetings since mid-April that I've chaired, and then I will chair the the JJCC JJRBG subcommittee meeting tomorrow, lots of acronyms, sorry, which is a public meeting that will be held in person. So with regards to, I'll take the JJRBG first, and then I'll go into JJCPA. So for JJRBG, we've had, so as I mentioned, we've had 3 related meetings since mid-April. 1 public meeting and 2 spending ad hoc subcommittee meetings. During the spending ad hoc subcommittee meetings, that subcommittee actually requested a process that's similar to JJCPA funding and considerations where governmental agencies draft proposals with budgets so that they can at least look at how the money could be spent. And then a budget was prepared for approval or possible approval tomorrow at the public in-person JJRBG meeting. So we have tried to move it forward since mid-April, and we hope to have an approved budget tomorrow after we discuss it with the JJRBG subcommittee. And that's for the JJRBG funds that apply to our SYTF population. So that's that part. Should I pause or should I do the rest?
I think you should continue the presentation.
Okay, sure. Okay. So that with regards to JJCPA, and I'm going to list some numbers based on the board memo, $92.2 million is in the trust. So that money is allocated but not yet spent. That includes $17.8 million of growth funds that were received in October, but the JJCC budgeted for the fiscal year that started July 1. So I'm subtracting that because that money is within the budget to be spent from July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. Additionally, there are 5 agencies. Okay, so one other thing, with the impact of COVID, since 2019, 2020, agencies have had carryover. There's 2 types of funding for JJCPA. There's base, which is more stable, and then there's growth funding, which is based on licensing fees, et cetera. So growth funding can vary. It started off as very low about in maybe 10, 15 years ago, and then last year it's $17.8 million. So it varies. So the growth money is less stable and it's one time, and base funding is considered as ongoing funding. So usually pre-COVID, there was not any carryover for base funding. But because of COVID, some agencies are still spending down their carryover from 2019-20, 2020-2021, 21-22, and then we have the current year's allocation. So if I tried to group that just for some perspective, and that amount, thought I had it. I'm sorry, I thought I had that amount and I do not, but it was over $20 million that has been carryover for the last 4 years. So that's a grouping of funding that's been carried over, that agencies are spending down a lot more, I guess the word is aggressively this year because we've come out of COVID, but for the years where schools were closed for partial years and the courts were closed just briefly, and then, services to youth in our juvenile halls and camps when youth were in isolation or, they were contained and services couldn't be provided. The money wasn't spent down as quickly. So COVID did have a huge impact on the spending down of the funds. Additionally, there are 5 or 6 agencies with large unspent balances that are being spent down this year. But as of March 31st, the billings had not reflected that, so the reporting didn't reflect it. So one of those agencies, and we've mentioned them in the board letter before, is the Department of Youth Development. Their carryover through to this year was 20 million of the 92 million, but they billed for the first 3.5 quarters in June. So we're going to be looking at how they're spending down. There's a few other agencies that have also large balances between $3 and $9 million that we're waiting to do year-end closing and and process those invoices so that it impacts the bottom line. But all of those, and I cannot find my notes, but I think it's over 20 to 30 million, including DYD, it's like 30 something million, which gets us down to under 30 million for the rest of the agencies who are spending down one-time money and this year's base funding with some carryover. So I don't know if that helps. COVID, did have a very large impact on agencies' ability to spend down. And then DYD, they have told us that, they went from YDD in DHS to DYD as a new department this year. So we just, in receiving their invoices, we will be processing as well as all of those year-end closing. And then at the end of the year, when the auditor controller closes out the special revenue fund where JJCPA funds are held, we hope to reflect a much better trust balance at that time. Oh, and then you had a data question, if I'm remembering correctly. So there are a few agencies. What's happened is last August, the former chair of JJCC formed a data ad hoc subcommittee. So I have chaired 3 data ad hoc subcommittees since April, and the county council is reviewing what data do we have to collect for JJCPA funded programs, and they're working on that, and they are supposed to have a recommendation by tomorrow. So we're looking at hopefully resolving the data issue so that we can move forward with 2 contracts, and I think there's 1 or 2 MOUs. I think it's 2 MOUs that are pending because of data issues. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay. Do we have any written or live public comments on this item?
We haven't received any written public comment on this item. Again, if our WebEx participants would like to comment, please raise your hand using the raise hand feature. Pollen users, please dial *3 to raise your hand to get in the queue. If anyone here in person wants to approach the front, we can start there. Any live commenters? Okay, we've got one. Okay, so we're going to begin with our live public commenters, and then we'll open the floor to our remote commenters. So again, please state your name and begin with your comment.
Hello, my name is Eduardo Dumbrique, and I appreciate all the data that you're sharing and a lot of the, I'm not familiar with a lot of the terms and the organizations involved, but the experience of the youth on a day-to-day, it seems like they're being transferred here and there and here. Their education is still, I'm sure they're getting some form of education. It's troubling to me to think that the schoolhouse is in the building. It reminds me of, honestly, Pelican Bay SHU, where they have everything inside and you just never leave it. The yard, everything is confined within the building. And that has an effect on how you feel. Going to school, which is what they're going to be doing when they go home, is actually like leaving the house to go to school and to come back. So, but if the building's built that way, it is. But a lot of these funds that there's a surplus, and I don't know where them funds are supposed to go or what they're supposed to do with them, but I feel like it would be useful to give these children opportunities, skills, or even to bus their families in to visit them, because that was a challenge growing up. It's difficult to go through the weekend and not get a visit. And it's nice to see everyone else and get visits, but if you do get a visit, it's like one here and then one there. So to the extent that these funds could be used to enhance the experience of the youth, to make them feel, valued, and to prepare them for when they go home. And that would go to the question of recidivism. I don't know what their circumstances are, going home, and a lot of that's out of our control. But I do remember Governor Newsom signing a bill that said that when kids get released from detention, that they'll have a probation officer, but also an educational officer. And I'm unfamiliar where that's at and if it's, how it's being implemented. But if that's true, then there really should be some coordination between home and detention.
So sorry to interrupt you, but your 2 minutes are up. I just heard the little chime, but thank you for
Thank
your
you.
comments. So sorry, but
okay.
I appreciate you being here with us. Anybody else in the room for live public comment? Okay, then we want to go to any virtual participants, and it looks like we have some.
We have two. We're going to start with Crystal.
Yes, Crystal Jones again. Just like the parent and the leader just mentioned, I was asking by request, can we use the surplus of unspent funds to lease the Mental Health American Indian Counseling Center space that is available now in Montebello for developing a charter school for youth apprenticeship and childcare mental health services? Will the probation department support me and sponsor me to lease the development and implementing trained and decarcerated intentionally, as well as homeschool enrollment and family connections? That's key to them reentering into society and into the community. And I'm curious to find out how we can tap in to maximize these funds and support the youth together with intentional educational programs and things to rebuild their self-esteem and life skills, as well as creating the atmosphere for them to be decarcerated, re-incarcerated numbers in the incarcerated juvenile system, and improve each individual youth, young adult, as well as anyone that has these crossover returns into the system with strategic behavioral training, workshops, mentorships, and counseling sessions within this development and housing center. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Next up, we have Aditi.
From Children's Defense Fund, California. I just want to lay out all the dollars here that are on the table. It's $99 million of unspent JJCPA funds, 1.8 million of unspent complex care dollars, and 88 million of unspent SB 823 SYTF dollars. That is an unbelievable amount of money to keep on the table when young people are overdosing and suffering inside of our halls. And it is clear that despite all the flowery language, the reason this money is unspent is because probation in this county is more interested in investing into caging facilities, into incarceration of our young people. They don't want money to go towards any alternative that would prove that probation cannot and is not equipped to take care of young people. If they actually wanted to spend this money, they could, because there are plenty of CBOs, plenty of organizations outside of probation that could use that funding to help young people. But the reason it sits unspent is because that is not in probation's interest. And on top of that, Local 685 and probation has the audacity to go to the state and ask for California taxpayer money for the halls and camps alone. That's the only thing that that AB 695 would do. It would be pouring taxpayer money into our halls and camps when millions of dollars sit untouched by probation in this county alone. It is atrocious. And this county, it's honestly, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for LA County that Local 685 is using their lobbying to try to get state taxpayer money when all of this money is sitting on the table unspent. And I hope that the Probation Oversight Commission is tracking that bill and making sure that you are opposed to it, because as you can see through this presentation and just through the sheer amount of unspent dollars, probation cannot be trusted with any more money.
Thank you for your comment. We have one more virtual public comment.
Good morning.
Good morning, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Oh, awesome. You know, the two previous speakers tie in so beautifully. And so when I say Community Coalition, Arts for Killing Justice Network, Children's Defense Fund, Youth Justice Coalition, the Information Project, ARC, so many. We can do this together. We can open up prisons. Remember, the mandate from the people is that it doesn't look like this in 2 or 3 years. That is totally different. Hear the voice of the beautiful lady before. Hear the voice of consciousness. It's so many years back to back, we've been like, we're here. We have the opportunity. Truth, grace, reconciliation. Way bigger than even South African apartheid. But it has to be a real reconciliation. Reconcile. That's an economic term as well as a spiritual term. The money, the manna, what are we working for? Do all that we do as unto the Lord. Giving thanks always. Giving thanks always. Share. The greatest of faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these are love. The King James Version says charity. And people are working and have been working as amateurs. And we see the benefit now, right? Community health promoters from the Department of Mental Health. Let's get folks with lived experiences. Yes, youth leadership that will not ostracize the elderly. Yes, yes. So I redirect funding from criminal justice to the Department of Youth Development. Seriously, authentically, for the glory of God.
Thank you for your comment. There's no more comments.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, are there any questions or comments? Yes. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Terry.
Okay, so there's a lot of unspent money, and I think what I'm most interested in is wondering, how is probation advocating for these funds to be released? We have the information showing that it's not necessary for organizations to provide this identifying data for youth. There's no legal basis. It brings up ethical concerns. You have an initiative like Ready to Rise, which was 49 community-based agencies who were doing this work in the community, working with youth, both inside the facilities, outside the facilities. It was effective. They spent their money and then they were put on hold and contracts weren't renewed because of, one of the issues being this idea of having to provide identifying data. So as a partner with Ready to Rise, I'm curious to know how is probation department then advocating for, now that we have this information, I know there's a subcommittee meeting tomorrow, but how are you all advocating then for those organizations to get back in contract in addition to other organizations being able to be in contract and provide these services? Because it did a huge disservice to those youth, to those organizations who hired staff and weren't able to pay people. And meanwhile, youth were just left hanging. And those organizations did so much, even during COVID, spending funds, spending their own organizational resources to do what they had to do to help families. So it's a problem.
So for tomorrow's meeting, that is a JJRBG, a subcommittee meeting, which is dealing with the budget for SYTF young people, which is separate from JJCPA, which is where fiscal intermediary services, and that contract is funded. So yes, that contract has been delayed. County Council, we are expecting a recommendation tomorrow, and then we have a meeting scheduled with the organization who we need to finalize the contract with in, I believe it's less than 2 weeks to move forward. So we're hoping that we can resolve as a county, the data issue is resolved, and then we can move forward with that contract. It has another contract that supports it, which is capacity building. And then there are a few MOUs where this data issue has been the reason for the delay. I mean, there were other things in the process, but at the end, this is the last one. So we are working with them. We've had many meetings, and we've been working with the Data Ad Hoc Subcommittee, because that was the other thing that JJCC had adopted a resolution to move forward with. So we have had 3 meetings since April, and County Council has been a part of it. So we are hoping it gets resolved very quickly so we can move forward.
I guess what I'm wondering is, I mean, it sounds like the subcommittee produced their results. I mean, it is, what is the lingering issue? And I guess what I'm wondering is, as a partner in an initiative like Ready to Rise, or, you know, for any organizations who this, you know, data issue is impacting, how are you all advocating now that we have this report showing that there's really no need to collect that data? As a partner, how are you all advocating for those programs to be able to, not just waiting for, you know, meetings, but what's your advocacy role in this? Because you're a partner.
Well, we of course are engaging, and we're working with everybody, because that was one report. And then there's the evaluation piece that we're looking at as well. And how do we do that? The legislation talks about implementing evidence-based programs that prove to reduce crime and delinquency. So how do we do that, and how can evaluation show it? So that was all of the pieces that were discussed through the ad hoc subcommittee. But we do need County Council to weigh in on behalf of the county for these funds, because that is the process overall. And so we're hoping that that gets resolved this week, and that we can move forward. So we've been working with County Council as well as the agencies in the process.
Yeah. And there was a really strong evaluation report, which did produce evidence of what a program can do, what these organizations were able to achieve, what are those benchmarks to change that are important if you're trying to reduce crime, trying to reduce recidivism. And has probation read that and is advocating for those findings, because data was produced?
Well, we requested that the JJCPA evaluator look at how do we report out and do evaluation on JJCPA if the identified information is not available. So that's why they produced that report. So that is in consideration with all the other feedback, because the agencies had other feedback as well as that, and the legislation review by County Council. So that's all with County Council. We're hoping to resolve that quickly. So we did have 3, we had to have those data ad hoc subcommittee meetings because we committed to that, and JJCC had adopted a resolution. So we did have 3 of them in less than 2 months. So we are trying to move that forward as quickly as possible. So I think that's part of our advocacy as a department, but we have to work also through the process that's, what do you call it? That's how it's defined. Because when we talk to BSCC, which is the oversight body, it's changed. The actual way their oversight changed was through AB 1998. So it's not collecting certain data in a certain way anymore. It's comparing it to trends and doing other things. BSCC also told us that any data specific questions, we needed to refer to County Council. So we are working within the county structure to try to do that as quickly as possible so we can get moving on these funds and move forward with these 2 contracts and the MOUs.
Okay, I have some questions. I just wanted to state for background, because I'm not sure that everyone in the world knows what JJCPA is, right? So it's Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act.
Thank you.
Those millions of dollars are dedicated to preventing young people from having contact with the system. The system that we know is currently in a state of crisis, right? So it just like for appearance's sake, this looks really bad, that we have $99 million that are unspent to prevent our young people from coming into contact with the system that we know has created some really harmful outcomes. And so with that kind of background, you stated that there were 13 meetings that were held this year. It's my understanding that at least, one of those, for example, JJRBG Spending Plan Subcommittee meetings, was only attended by you and one other member who sat on kind of that subcommittee. So it seems like there's a little bit of a problem ensuring that everyone is on the same page within the JJCC and within these subcommittees. So has that been part of the delay in moving kind of some of these dollars forward, or moving these dollars out, I should say, is like just an ability for people to actually come together?
So the spending ad hoc subcommittee has to be less than quorum of JJRBG. JJRBG quorum is 10 people, so it has to be less than 5. So there's 4 members on the subcommittee, but only 2 volunteered, with the chair being probation. So the 2 volunteers were in the first meeting, and then an additional person was added in the second meeting. So there were 4 in the second meeting.
Okay.
So that, just that part, can you repeat the other
But I guess
part?
I'm just like, because we're talking not just about dollars, at least for the JJRBG. And again, just for background, JJRBG is Juvenile Justice Realignment Block Grant.
Thank you.
So with the closure of the Division of Juvenile Justice, Department of Juvenile Justice, right,
Mm-hmm.
our kind of state carceral facilities for young people who are adjudicated or convicted of more serious crimes, those young people are now staying within the county. And they are staying within the county in what's called a secure youth treatment facility, which is now at Barry J. Nydorf and Kilpatrick. And there are millions of dollars that the state is rerouting to at least LA County, right? We've got something like 88 or maybe almost $100 million that are allocated to care for those young people who are adjudicated of more serious offenses. And we got $8 million about 2 years ago, another 30-some million dollars last year, another $30 million this year, and none of those dollars, have any of those dollars been spent?
No, because we have not had a spending plan approved by the JJRBG. So the JJRBG has been in existence from, I believe it was early 2021. It might have been earlier than that. And I know that their focus for 2 years was on facilities for SYTF. I can't really answer questions before I was assumed being the chair in mid-April, but since mid-April, I can answer with regards to the meetings. However, prior to that, I know their majority of their focus, it's my understanding, was the actual choosing or recommendation for the facilities for these young people who have been ordered to SYTF.
Okay, but the probation department is responsible for administering those funds, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and none of those dollars have been spent down. Just okay. So that's almost $100 million that we haven't spent down to care for our young people who are kind of about to do the longest periods of time in our juvenile carceral facilities. There is a spending plan that's going to be approved tomorrow. Is that correct?
It's
hopefully.
It's put on the agenda for approval, yes.
Okay. There's very little transparency around that process in terms of what programs have been identified for young people, amounts that have been identified for young people, the specifics related to the programs that have been identified for those young people. Is there a plan to create something that resembles transparency around like how we're going to spend down those tens of millions of dollars?
Well, the spending plan, I think a spending plan ad hoc subcommittee did review additional documentation in order to complete the proposal of what they're recommending for the JJRBG to approve tomorrow. So we're going to be making a presentation, and then the subcommittee, the spending ad hoc subcommittee is also going to be weighing in and giving additional information on the process as well as the programs. And then the actual JJRBG will have discussion on approving that spending plan.
Any of those documents that the subcommittee reviewed, will those be publicly available?
They usually, we have not done that before. This is the first time we've done JJRBG, and we have not done.
When you say this is the first time we've done JJRBG, I don't know what you mean by that.
This is the first time we're approving a full budget, or we're trying to propose to approve a full budget for JJRBG. So the spending plan ad hoc subcommittee will be summarizing the process and all of the information that they received in order to make the presentation.
Okay, so like, for example, when $600,000 is dedicated to visitation and transporting families to visit their young people, like, what does that mean?
That means that we are going to do solicitation for community-based organizations. That's our recommendation of the subcommittee, to help parents to visit the young people at the different sites for youth who are ordered to SYTF.
How do you come up with that number?
We estimated it.
Like based on what?
3 facilities, the size of the county, the number of youth, and we're going to look at different options for that, but we want to get it out as soon as possible. What we do want to support, and I believe our interim chief came to the POC and also supported transporting parents to visit young people, whether it's SYTF or in any other facility. So we wanted to make a line item for that. The subcommittee is going to review it. They may increase, decrease, however that they believe is necessary in their process, because they have done that before with JJCPA.
Okay. And Mr. Sanders, will you be a part of that conversation, given that you're kind of
Yes, I will be.
heading that bureau?
Yes, I will be.
Okay, and then, sorry, I have some additional questions related to the JJCC. So there has not been a public JJCC meeting since January, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you mentioned a quarterly report, I think? Is there some sort of quarterly report that's generated by the JJCC and probation related to spending or the spending down of dollars?
We have this semi-annual
Okay.
board report.
Okay, and that gets, that's what I'm referencing, but that's fine. Okay. Do any of you mentioned a number of subcommittees within the JJCC. I think you said the CMJJP, the governance, data ad hoc. Do any of those subcommittees deal with the overall budget and like the spending down of JJCPA dollars and monitoring that?
The CMJJP.
Okay. And that group has met, you said 3 times?
Since mid-April.
Okay.
We met in March as well, but I counted from the time I
Okay.
assumed chair. Yes.
And then you said that there are some contracts and MOUs that have yet to be signed. So for the 2022 to 2023 proposed budget, how many contracts or MOUs for dollars allocated for 2022, 2023 have yet to be signed?
We were asked to actually look at the data ones. So there are some that are were in process. No, let me rephrase that. I didn't do a review of that. What happens with funding is non-county governmental agencies require an MOU. We require contracts for those when we go out for solicitation, and county agencies don't require an MOU. So they can spend down with a budget, et cetera. So the spending down, the question that was asked to me in the last few weeks were how many were paused because of the data issue.
Okay.
So that's 2 MOUs and 2 contracts.
Okay. But you don't have information related to kind of as a whole?
No, not for today.
Okay. And so then the 2 MOUs and the 2 contracts, those are just specific to data?
Correct.
So again, one question about the data. It's my understanding that initially Parks and Rec had not signed kind of, I guess it would be a contract because
MOU?
An MOU, sorry, because of this data issue?
You know, I'm not, I'd have to check because they have not had it, not to my recollection, had an issue with the data, but I can check on that.
Okay, that was my understanding, that there was an exception made for Parks After Dark around this data issue.
No, it wasn't just the exception that was made for a few programs that did widespread events for the public, like at a park at night, they would be doing surveys.
Okay.
But yes, so that's true. So it was Parks After Dark, and there's other agencies that have that type of service. And so whichever groupings did, that was the requirement, that they would have surveys as part of the evaluation. There needed to be a mechanism to evaluate the effectiveness of the program. So they were allowed to do surveys because it's such a large group at one time.
Why not just do surveys for the other, I guess, providers?
All the other providers are individual youth-based or group youth-based in small groups, whereas this is like a Parks After Dark Christmas event where, and a community event. So it might have 400 people who attend all at once. And so we were trying to figure out a mechanism to evaluate the program. And so surveys for like one-time events with large groups was a determined process.
That was just determined by probation?
No, it's determined by the evaluator.
Okay.
And we asked them, how could we properly evaluate? What are the options? How can we explore this? So it's large group, one-time community events, and it could be over time, right, over the year.
So was it asked of the evaluator if that same type of survey could be provided to the young folks or to the organizations who are kind of providing smaller group support to young people?
Well, usually for individual or group services that are smaller, we collect individual data. Now, I know that the issue is identifiable versus not, but
Mhm.
generally speaking, say there's a community-based organization that does tutoring,
Mhm.
and they served 100 young people during the fiscal year. We would want to know there was 100 youth, their age range, generally where they lived and all of that, so we can report out to JJCPA, to the board, et cetera. Funding is being utilized to serve these many young people in this program, et cetera. Just a general report on who is receiving services from this funding. So the place where it's been a concern was the two pieces of identifiable information, not the general aggregate data, like
Right.
number of youth and all of that. So that's been the issue for those contracts that I mentioned and the MOUs.
And can you specify what are those two pieces?
Name
of-
and date of birth.
And so it's probation's position that without name and date of birth, you cannot assess the effectiveness of a program?
It has been our understanding of the law that in order to look at young people and whether or not a program has been effective at reducing crime and delinquency, that we need to be able to show whether or not the young person has been arrested.
But that's not the case for like a Parks After Dark.
Well, the survey process was going to be tried for a year, and if it was successful in meeting an evaluation threshold, so say you had 400, and this is just, I'm talking very loosely, 400 community members, and we got one survey, that would not help with an evaluation of a program that was funded. But if they had a certain percentage, I don't remember what it was, then the evaluator would look to evaluate based on that.
I guess, and how long has this data issue been an issue? Right, because historically, probation has not asked for this identifiable information.
We have.
For how many years?
Since JJCPA started.
You've asked for name and date of birth?
Yes.
And so then it suddenly became an issue.
Yes, at JJCC in August.
And you're saying that providers provided you with name and date of birth of all of the young people that they served?
That was what the process was. And as we move more and more towards serving youth who are not on probation, because a lot of the money previously, not all, but a group of money previously were probation youth. So it was not an issue because they were the young people under our jurisdiction or supervision, right? But as we've moved over time, JJCC has made the decision to fund more programs that are prevention oriented. So then the process has moved and now the issue came up.
Okay. All right. I guess there are no further questions and we can move to the next agenda item.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, I'm
Just
so
to
sorry.
No, I just had it. So the Parks After Dark type programs were allowed, it sounds like there was a pilot in place and they were allowed to do their programming to see if data could be collected in a way that shows some evidence. So I guess if you could clarify, why wasn't that same opportunity afforded to some of those community-based organizations who actually had data of effectiveness previously? Why were they stopped for a year, which means all those youth who were not served? That I'm trying to understand the distinction. It's okay over here, but then not okay over here.
Those are programs that are actually youth focused, not community events, which large groups. It's very different. So that's the difference.
I know we need to move on. It doesn't fully make sense to me.
Any other comments or questions?
So actually for people in the audience, we did the live comment portion for this. So I don't know, Millie, if you want to allow it or if we want to ask people to hold until general public comment.
I think I'm gonna, just because we are wildly behind schedule, I'm just gonna ask that we hold it.
I have a question over here as well. I know there's been a lot of, just as, I've been kind of dizzy here with all these these long questions and answers, but just one simple question. What subcommittee approves this money?
The CMJJP Ad hoc Subcommittee recommends the money, you're talking about JJCPA?
The money that's allocated for these programs, like who's the gatekeeper for that?
So it's JJCC.
And there's a meeting tomorrow.
No, that's JJRBG.
Oh my God. Okay, so
Sorry, so tomorrow's meeting is for the SYTF funding. They are a subcommittee of JJCC.
okay, so there's just two groups. I got that part. There's obviously people who've applied for this money. Is that correct? I mean, there's money that's available for people to acquire,
Every year, annually,
and
yes.
people have applied for it.
Annually, yes.
Correct. When is that going to be reviewed for approval? Is what the question is. Now that I figure out who's
So for
approving.
JJCPA, the approval usually takes place in January for the following fiscal year. Because then we go to the Board of Supervisors to get approval to apply, to receive the funding for the plan, et cetera. And then we have to apply for the funding on May 1. And then the funding takes effect July 1 for the fiscal year.
But no one has received any money. You're just kind of giving me the framework of it.
No, the money's allocated. It's
Okay.
unspent, but it's in process. And so there's a lot of overlap. There is.
Can you, with some certainty, in this public space here, suppose maybe the words guarantee, that at this point now, that money will be approved?
Well, the money's already approved.
Well, it will be then, approved is one thing, but it's going down the conveyor belt, right? At some point, someone's going to receive it to apply it.
The agencies,
Correct.
so I'll pick our great partner, DYD. They do have access to the money. They had 20 million that was carried over to this fiscal year, and they received an additional amount, so for next year. So they are spending it down. But as of April, we had not, or March, for this board letter, we hadn't received any invoices yet. We just did in June. So there's some lag time between after the allocation, the spending, the invoicing, and the reporting out. So there is some lag time with that.
Okay, I'm
Commissioner
highly
Morgan?
confused now. She was asking about this program that hasn't been funded yet. It's been a while since we had this money. Other than DYD, when was the last time any money was dispersed to any of these CBOs or organizations?
So various county departments contract with CBOs. So when the department receives their allocation, approved allocation effective at beginning any fiscal year, then they move forward with spending down the dollars. And then they invoice probation as reimbursement. That's the process for JJCPA. So it's annually that money is allocated, and then they have money previously if they had received an adopted allocation, and then they had some carryover because of our time in COVID. So it's kind of a moving process annually.
Is there anyone outside of the probation family that has received any access? Because it sounds like there's like a little bit of backroom deals going on here, like people who are inside or even probation has access to this money and uses it.
No.
That's not the case?
Because
I want to make sure that.
it's approved for, so maybe I can do this, because there's a large spreadsheet that's provided for JJCC to approve the funds, and it's broken down by agency or agency who's going to go out to CBOs. And there's a whole lot of information on it every year. So the Wednesday before Thanksgiving of 2022, it was emailed out to everybody and posted on our website, and it was adopted by JJCC on January 19th of this year for next fiscal year. So you can see the list of every agency that was funded, if they had any carryover, what percentage that they dedicated the funding, or they will dedicate it to CBO contracts, and then what groupings or what strategy under the plan, which is developed or revised and reviewed every year, the funding would fall under prevention, intervention, all of those things, evaluation. And so there's that huge spreadsheet. They are on our website, but we do email it out as well. And then there's an annual process that See, the ad hoc subcommittee meets between 10 and 15 times in order to revise a plan and package up a funding recommendation for JJCC to consider so that it's done prior to this whole process of applying and receiving board approval in preparation for the following fiscal year. So on January 19th, you'll see a spreadsheet that was adopted for fiscal year 23-24, and it lists every single agency that was funded.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. There are no further comments or questions. I know that was wildly confusing, and I hope that in meetings to come, we'll have a little better understanding of these $92 million that are unspent and how they can get out, and hopefully the data issue will be resolved tomorrow. So in agenda, we're going to move to, I think it's agenda item 6, kind of jumping around a little bit. We will discuss and take appropriate action on a report from Probation's Human Resources Division Manager, Deanna Carlisle, on current data about staff who are active on leave and the call-out rates between January 2023 to May 2023. We all know that the staffing crisis has been discussed at length by this body and in reports to this body by Probation. The lack of adequate staffing has been part of the explanation for the BSCC findings of unsuitability, for the failure to complete de-escalation training and phase out OC spray, for youth not going to classrooms for school, for backlog of 1,000 use of force investigations, and many other issues. We are also trying to pinpoint which of these issues are particular to LA County Probation and which are broader county issues or issues typical of other law enforcement agencies. If you'd like to provide a public comment on this item, please raise your hand now on WebEx. If you're in the room, you can approach the front of the room to get online when the presentation ends. Ms. Carlisle, thank you for joining us. And if you could proceed.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask if you received the information. Does everybody have a copy of it? Okay. Give me 1 second to log in.
And I think what Ms. Carlisle is referencing is also attached or linked to the agenda connected to item number 6.
Okay, so it's my understanding that the commissioners asked to have me up here and provide data related to departmental overall leave usage and breakdowns, as well as breakdowns for the juvenile halls. So that's what's been provided. There's a lot of numbers. I'll start to run through them. I'll provide a little bit of clarification because it's the county, so there's some initials in here, and I'll kind of explain what those refer to, and we'll go from there. Okay, so departmental data, just to set the ground floor. The department has 5,509 budgeted full-time equivalent positions. Currently, the department has 4,386 active employees. We do have 5 active employees that are part-time, so that's why we say full-time equivalent. The department has 1,128 full-time equivalent vacancies. So going into leaves, department-wide, we have 415 staff on full-time leave as of today. Historically, we were asked to look back from January. So in January, the number was 392. In February, it was 382. In March, it was 405. In April, it was 376. In May, it was 422. And in June, it was 413. So full-time leave does vary. I'll give an example. Myself, I was off for about 12 weeks. I had double knee replacement last year. You know, that's a typical recovery time for someone to be off. So when someone has to have something like that, or they get a doctor's note that takes them off work full-time, that's what we're referring to as continuous leave. Okay, what the department also has is a number of intermittent or modified leave duty cases. So department-wide, we have 665 intermittent leave or modified duty cases as of today. Let me explain. Any individual can have more than one leave on file. So again, using myself as an example, I could have an intermittent leave to care for something myself. Let's just say I have some sort of medical condition that requires regular doctor's visits. So I could have a note on file for myself. I have 2 sons. I could have a note on file. My son could need some sort of medical care, so I could have a note on file for that. And I maybe care for my aging mother, and I have a note on file to be able to do that as well. So one person can have multiple leaves on file. So when we give the number of intermittent leaves, there's kind of an asterisk next to that. Don't assume that that number equates to people, because there are staff that have overlapping in several leaves. Does that make sense? Okay. So department-wide, the 665 intermittent leave or modified duty cases as an aggregate, we had 657 in January of this year. We had 613 in February, 644 in March, 639 in April, 637 in May, and 655 in June. So as people come off and go on, usually with intermittent leave, it's for a period of time, up to a year, and then someone has to recertify. So those numbers stay a little bit more stable than others. The next display we have is the number of employees on modified duty. This is again department-wide, and we have 3 terms here. So we have a column titled CAA. CAA is conditional work assignment, and that refers to someone who has permanent work restrictions, but we have to go through a process when we're looking at someone with permanent work restrictions who can no longer do their job, to make sure that we've really evaluated, we have all the information. If they're a county employee, they may be eligible for a partial disability, retirement supplement if they go to a different position that doesn't pay as much as their current position. So let's just say I'm making, $100,000 a year, and the only position that I can take that is not my current position, because I have permanent restrictions prohibiting me from that, is paying at $50,000 a year, then I can apply for a supplemental disability retirement from LACERA to offset that difference, so I can continue to make the money, but I can also work. So those conditional assignments can take some time. We get questions a lot about why are people on conditional assignments so long? Because we have no control over the LACERA process, and it takes up to 2 years. So we have pretty stable numbers there as well. In January, we had 57 staff throughout the department on conditional assignment, CAA. In February, we had 61. In March, 61. In April, 56. In May, 60. And in June, 54. Now, the next modified duty category is work hardening, or as you can see to the side there, WHTAA, but that's a work hardening assignment. And work hardening means that someone has temporary restrictions. So again, using myself, I don't mind sharing, I'm really excited about my double knee replacement, but when I came back, I couldn't do stairs, and honestly, I still can't. But, so if part of my job duties, my essential functions required me to take stairs, which fortunately they don't, but if they did, then I would need to have a modification, right? I would need to, have a conversation with my supervisor and say, hey, is this acceptable? Now, if I worked for Scott, that might not be acceptable, right? I have a desk job, it might be acceptable. So we have to analyze that for each and every person. So we have a number of people on work hardening assignments, temporary work restrictions, and those numbers for January of this year are 64, February 63, March 57, April 57, May 53, and June 75. So that completes kind of the breakdown on leaves for the department-wide data. Going into the juvenile hall data, juvenile hall has 1,242 full-time equivalent budgeted positions. We currently have 839 active employees. We have 403 full-time equivalent vacancies. Currently, we have 242 staff on full-time leave. I've done the math for you if you're curious, it's 29%. So that's 111 from Central Juvenile Hall. However, with all the movements, we're going to have to reevaluate, where everyone's located and falls. 130 from Barry J. Nydorf and 1 from LP because we do have some staff assigned to LP for budget purposes. So if you look at the number of staff in the juvenile halls on continuous leaves as of January, and there is a breakdown, but I'm just going to give you the totals. There's 273. In February, there's 239. In March, there was 270. In April, 267. In May, 292. And in June, 275. Moving down the data that was requested, for juvenile hall intermittent leave, we have 241, almost the same number. Again, there can be overlap because people can hold, a number of intermittent leaves. They could even be on a temporary full-time leave and have an intermittent leave on file for that period. So again, these numbers don't equate strictly to staff like they do if you're on a full-time leave. But we have 241, which is again approximately 29% of intermittent leave or modified duty cases on file. So breaking down those cases, we have in January, intermittent leaves, we have 252 on file for the juvenile halls. In February, 237. In March, 238. In April, 247. In May, 251, and in June, 251. For the number of employees on modified duty, meaning the permanent work restrictions pending reassignment, we have in January 25 for the juvenile halls, February 28, March 31, April 31, May 31, or 33, sorry, April 33, May 31, and June 27. Sliding down to the number of employees on modified duty or work hardening, temporary work restrictions. In January for the juvenile halls, we had 47. In February, 46. In March, 35. In April, 39. In May, 34. And in June, 54. So that's the overview of the staff on leaves throughout the department and then in the juvenile halls. So to give some context about why I'm here reporting on these numbers, as the DERM, the Departmental HR Manager for probation, I oversee all the HR functions in the department. We are a departmental HR team, so we do all the hands-on work. We have a team under our risk management section called Disability Management and Compliance. You may be formerly familiar with them as Return to Work. So they manage those cases. And when I say manage the case, there's legal framework for all of us who are employees anywhere in the great state of California, in the county of Los Angeles. There's federal law. And so to make sure that we're compliant as a department with all of these regulations, we have trained staff who assist management in overseeing leaves, making sure that things like interactive processes are done, processing leaves, doing all the paperwork, and then tracking and making sure that we have information on file that's sufficient to justify someone being off. And so to give you an idea, I've been in public sector HR for 26 years. I've worked in 3 different counties, and the norm, and this is not something, this is just my experience and knowledge, the norm typically falls somewhere between 5 and 10% of your staff off on leave at any given time. Now, I had mental health agencies, and that can go up a little bit higher, so we went up to about 15%. What we see here sometimes is up to 50%. I'll just say that is an extraordinary problem, and it makes it very challenging to manage, especially if the leaves are intermittent or interspersed or day-to-day. Right, because we can plan. If I tell my boss I'm having double knee replacement next year, I'm going to be out for 12 weeks, we sit down, we plan it out. If you call the morning of and somebody needs, 12 one-on-ones and you're one of those 12 people and you call out, then we're scrambling. So the leave issue is significant. And the department, so former Chief Gonzalez reached out to DHR in April of last year, the central HR department for the county, and they oversee and create the policy and procedures for the county as a whole. Chief Gonzalez reached out last year and asked DHR to come and assist us with our leave challenges. They came in and they have reviewed all of our processes. They've reviewed case files. They've assisted us with some long-term leaves that we had on the book, helping to process and get those long-term leaves moved out. They reviewed all of our hiring processes to see if we could implement efficiencies in recruitment, in backgrounds, in all of these. And we have realized, some process improvements, which is wonderful, but we continue to see a high rate of leave utilization. And because they've reviewed the cases, these are valid leave cases. We are all, if you're an employee, you're provided certain rights, and you can go to a doctor and a doctor can give you a note, and we as the employer have to review that and take that and grant you certain amounts of leave. And we're just seeing an extraordinary amount of people who are utilizing those rights. But as far as our cases, this is not prior to my time, but this is not 2012, 2010, when we didn't know where staff were. We didn't know how long they'd been out. We know where every one of our staff is, and we know exactly how long they've been out. Our paperwork is up to date. Our tracking is up to date. Now, we have to work within the county system, and so sometimes reporting is a little challenging, but we are on top of all of these cases, and we're working very hard to, whenever we can, get somebody returned to work. But the reality is they need to be incentivized internally to want to be there, right? And I'm not here to speak to that, because I think you've had plenty of people much more knowledgeable. Chief Rosa, I've heard him in a few of these meetings talking about how to really get our staff to feel safe and comfortable, and I think that's part of what we're working on. But as far as the leave information goes, that's what my team oversees. Now, the next question had to do with call-outs. And call-outs, before I get into the data, I just want to explain, HR is kind of like, let's just say we're Walmart. Probation is Walmart. We're the headquarters, right? We're in, I don't know where Walmart headquarters is, but we're over there. We have many locations. Now, if you're an employee of Walmart, you don't call headquarters in wherever they are and say, I'm calling out today. You call your supervisor, you call your work location. Now, we want to do everything we can to help. So this new call-out system was created this year in conjunction with DHR, and I have data for it, but I may not be able to answer all questions, and I just want to preface the data that I am reporting. And hopefully we have some subject matter experts here as well from the location who can help. So I'm going to go into the call-out information. The reporting data was broken down by the location and reported by shift and location since March. We weren't tracking, I know you asked for January through now, we weren't breaking it down prior to March to this degree. Again, it's a new program that we developed last year and started utilizing in November. And so as we're using it more and more, we're developing more and more data tracking. So callouts from Barry J to March 22, March 23 to May 23 is listed here. The callout system was only implemented in November and really started tracking. So a lot of the information that's provided here is based on the tracking that each location did themselves internally. And I don't know if you want me to go through each line because there is a lot of data in here.
I think people can probably take a look at the data instead of having it read off.
Yeah, I don't think we need it read off. If you could just quickly, it says AM 213. Can you just reference the unit that you're referencing when you say 213?
Sure. Okay.
I'd just, if you could just say the unit, then I think we can read the numbers.
Okay, so what this is showing you is how many callouts that we had during the month of March. So 213 is the raw data.
Okay.
The average is 6.9 per AM shift. PM shift 563, average of 18.2. Night shift 249. So those are totals, and the totals are important, but the average is also important. But what's equally important is how many staff are expected to be there for each of those shifts. So for the AM shift, and again, I'm going to give you general, but for the AM shift, my understanding is it's expected somewhere between 60 and 90 staff during this time period for each of the locations, roughly. Okay, for the PM shift, I believe it was 40 to 60 during the time period and at each location. And then the night shift is about the same as the PM shift. Okay. So somewhere between 40 and 100 staff were expected for each of these. So that gives you the context of the number of staff that we're calling out for each of those. So it's broken down by Barry J. Nydorf, the information that was provided, and then by Central Juvenile Hall. Now, what we also did is we did calculations on our side, and our calculations are based on what was submitted to payroll. So there's another average number of employees at work. Now, this information is based on our payroll data, and this is an aggregate. And what it shows is the average number of employees at work for Central Juvenile Hall in January 23 was 76%, at Barry J 74%, and everywhere else 81%. So these calculations are based on time cards. So there's an assumption, first of all, that the time card is accurate, which unfortunately we know is not always the case. And it also is offset by anybody that's held over for overtime, held over or called in, or deployment. And so what it shows is, had we not done overtime, holdover, or deployment, those numbers would be far worse. Okay. So I think that concludes the data that was provided, and I'm sure there may be some questions.
I think we'll start with public comment. Do we have any written or live public comments for item number 6?
So we haven't received any written public comment on the item. For our virtual users, if you want to make a comment on this item, please use the raise your hand function on WebEx. For our call-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand to get in the queue. And of course, if you're here in person and want to comment on this item, please approach the front. So we're going to go ahead and begin with our live public commenters, and then we'll open the floor to our remote. If you can please start by stating your name and begin with your comment.
And I'm sorry, right, before you start, I apologize, but because of the time and we need to take a break, we are going to be limiting public comment to 1 minute per person.
Hello, my name is Daniel Basuano, he, him, his. I'm an advocate. I'm a person with lived experience. And to me, honestly, this all sounds bogus. Like, to hear the data resulting from leave and things of that nature. Like, if I did that at my job, they tell me to go on disability. You know, and we need people, probation staff, that could go into these juvenile facilities and be present for the youth. It's a bunch of excuses. If you're on leave for a year, you shouldn't be at that job, to be quite honest. You should be getting disability. It doesn't make sense to me how so many of the probation staff have this luxury to be able to do something like that. But a person like myself in the community, if I did that at my job, I wouldn't have a job, you know, I'd be on disability. They tell me to get funding through EBT, stuff like that. So for me, it doesn't make sense that I continue to hear the same thing over and over again. It just sounds like excuses to me. It doesn't sound like anything is being done to change what has been going on for years. And that's it.
Thank you for your comment.
How you doing? My name's Thomas Bell. Does your numbers count on how many people are out because they've been assaulted? You know, we just heard the gentleman talking about his job. I don't think at any other job, too many other jobs, you get attacked, you get people getting kicked open doors or getting out these imaginary cages that we keep hearing about, which is actually rooms, just to clarify. But You don't see that at too many jobs. You don't see people getting beat like they did 2 weeks ago at Silmar that no one really brings up and get sent to the hospital. This is some of the reasons why people are calling out when people are not showing up. Did anybody actually add that into the numbers as well? Because we just look at, oh, they don't want to come to work. I've been in this department for 8 years. I could probably count on maybe 2 hands, if not one, how many times I've called off. But I ain't been through what they're going through right now either. And if it was a choice out of me and showing up for my family safe, I'm gonna call out instead of coming to work and get beaten up like they're doing right now, and nothing's being done about it.
Thank you for your comments.
Piece of staff members, how many kids have you beat while quashing an incident or stopping? Because I've been beat by staff in my experience in juvenile hall. And so the thing is, we're not just dealing with an employee, we're dealing with people that are charged with protecting and taking care of our youth. And if they don't want to be there, they shouldn't be there. And to the extent that somebody's supposed to be overseeing these things, there's clearly taking advantage of the system. They're clearly loopholes with the allocation of funds. Even the funds, we're talking about funds that haven't been spent. The funds that have been spent, where are they being spent at, and whose interest is being served there? The Parks After Dark is not youth-centered. It's community-based, which, I mean, I understand is whatever, but we're dealing with troubled youth that are in facilities for certain reasons. They're traumatized, or this, or they're that. So to the extent that there's people that are supposed to be monitoring this and seeing why certain things are not adding up, they really need to do their job. And it's, to me, is a failure on the part of.
That's your time.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. There will be additional time during general public comment for folks to have another opportunity to comment.
Hi, my name is Vivian Wong. I'm an education attorney with the Youth Justice Education Clinic at Loyola Law School and also a member of the Education Justice Coalition. Thank you so much for your report today. I think it is illuminating that so many staff are not coming into work and our youth are in danger because of that. I want to acknowledge the comments that were made about the safety of the probation officers not coming into work. We've heard over and over again this narrative that probation needs more staff to be able to make conditions more safe. But I hope that the Probation Oversight Commission can see past that and see this data and acknowledge that more staff isn't going to solve this problem. You know, nothing new is being done to actually address the safety concerns. And if you do hire more staff, what's to say that this won't continue to happen, right? Staff continue to be going out on leave. So please, I hope you'll consider that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate everybody here who stepped up to comment. Looks like okay, we have one more live commenter, maybe. Okay, all right, maybe not. Okay, so that concludes our live public comments. So we can see if we have any virtual participants.
We have two. We're going to start with Crystal.
I just want to say, I feel the same way as the advocate, Mr. Daniel. Enough is enough. It sounds like loopholes, manipulations, and lies on what you can conjure up to make it sound good versus what's really happening and being effective and impactful to actually see staff there protected, showing up and wanting to show up. So my question, how are you using intentional staff to supervise or meet the needs for intervention for these harmful sites or things to be happening within these facilities? And to find out how can we bring new strategies, new methods, and new programs with these unspent funds, and to ensure new workforce development with the AJCC workforce development funds and different things to allow collaborations and real effective change and implementation. The loopholes in games years over years overflow and crawl at the table, and the only program you could reach in is the Parks After Dark program because they could prove the studies of how many people they're actually serving. We all need equitable opportunities, and we can provide the feedback and surveys. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have calling user that starts with 310. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you. This is Mel. Just had one question as it relates to the report that was given. Just point of clarification. It seems like some of the callers are thinking this is a probation rule or a probation regulation or guidelines. I was just wondering if this is probation only or is this throughout the entire county with all of the departments? And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Did we have anyone else?
Thank you. I will turn it over to commissioners for any comments or questions. I don't know if we,
That's okay.
Can we take a break before comments and questions, or do we need to complete this agenda item before we? Okay, we will take a 15-minute break for folks to stretch their legs, use the restroom, and we will be back at 12:13. And I would like to create some time for commissioners to ask any questions or to share any comments they might have. Commissioner Meredith?
This is an agenda item I've been looking for. A couple of the issues here, I'm going to toss them out. You may or may not have answers to them. One is I hear about the safety in the halls, and I have seen it. I know one of the Board of Supervisors actually went out to a facility, and she sat there with some SYTF youth, and there was no DSO around because they were short-staffed. And that was on Father's Day. And I understand on holidays, a lot of people are calling in sick, and I understand they call in sick. We can't ask why because of HIPAA. But there has to be a workaround to make this happen because everybody says, I'm too scared to come to work. Well, you're too scared to come to work, you're making the problem worse because you're not there to back up your peers. You know, that's a big problem. So if you're too scared to come to work, call me. I will come sit with you. I'm not worried about that. The other thing, this is what I'm focusing on, is these numbers don't necessarily, in my mind, reflect what I see when I go to facilities as far as percentage. Because when I go out there, they seem to be really understaffed. People calling in sick. I'm getting from different sources, they're working 2 and 3 shifts in a row, which is not even, it's a safety hazard on top of it. But also people that are being asked to fill in, either it be management or supervisors or even officers, all of a sudden come up with some job-specific notes that they can't go work that facility. How are we going to fix that? How are we going to get people back to work or get them off our books? That's kind of where I'm at with this. I'm done. If you're too scared to come to work, go to Parks and Rec.
Okay, so there were a lot of questions in there, and I'll try to answer, but you might want to remind me if I move past one too quickly or I don't address one. So yes, we have been doing we've taken a lot of measures to try and address bringing people back to work. Everything from monetary incentives, you know, there were bonuses offered last year, to providing that sense of safety, additional training is my understanding. And I'm not here to speak on behalf of you know, the facility and the facility management because that's not my role, but we collaborate quite a bit and we talk about this a lot. This isn't, unfortunately, it's not a really new problem, but it has continued to a point where yes, it's a big challenge. So when you go on site, currently what Chief Rosa has requested is that everybody go deploy. I myself, I don't know how much help I am, but I could perhaps do some programming on writing a resume. I don't know. I'm open to that. But you know, everyone is asked to deploy whether you have restrictions or not, and then we want to work with you at the location because there are things like overseeing visitation that perhaps some of our staff with restrictions can do. So they're working to try and do that. But if you're going into a unit and you're looking for supervision, and we have 30 people with restrictions and only 40 people that are full duty, you might be seeing some impacts. You know, as I mentioned, the numbers that were provided at the end from payroll show that there's, you know, about 76%. We know that's high. And that's a result of all of these measures. That's a result of overtime, of holdovers. And I agree with you completely. There's plenty of data. I'm not offering my opinion. There's data that talks about what happens to humans when, you know, we try and work at a heightened sense of response for more than about 12 hours, right? So the other question you asked is, what are we doing to try and get people back? We have always tried to work with staff on return to work. That's why it was called return to work. What we do concretely, we reach out to the doctor. We explain to the doctor, hey, we have a return to work program. We have modified duty. If a note is given that's a little vague or ambiguous and we don't understand it, we ask for clarification. Deanna can't work in a juvenile hall. That's not a restriction, that's kind of an opinion. But Deanna can't climb stairs. Deanna can't hear noises behind her, and she can't see clearly, right? So, you know, for her to work in a function where she has to be at heightened response, where she has to be able to respond immediately, be able to stand up, sit down quickly, climb stairs, that's going to be a challenge. That we can address, right? That we can look at. And the reality is we're seeing a lot of notes right now, and we're realizing that we have challenges with our staff and their ability to do the level of work that's needed. So as a department, we are also working on right now moving all of our position physical requirements, because they varied from light to medium to arduous. So for all of our sworn staff, because we do have this need to pull people in to cover, so we need all of our staff to be ready. I liken it to a fireman. Most of the time, firemen sit around the firehouse and watch TV, but when there's a fire, they better be ready, right? They better be able, physically able to get out there and schlep around 100 pounds of fire hose and put out that fire. So if you do your job duties based on the fact that maybe Scott sits at a desk a lot and does a lot of desk work and he's on his computer, that could look like light duty, but it's not, because Scott might have to go out and break up a fight. And so we're looking at those measures. We're looking at measures all the way across the board. Like I said, staff training so that they feel comfortable and safe. Bringing in more staff does make a difference. If you're the only person in a unit, you're not going to feel as safe and secure as if you're the fourth person in a unit. And so the staffing is critical. Bringing people in, having the people there, having the right training, having you know, and as I mentioned, financial incentives were there, but I believe, and this is just Deanna Carlisle's personal HR opinion, we need to find out how to intrinsically motivate our staff to want to be there. I agree. And I think that all of these measures that we put in place are to try and address that, to try and provide the training, to try and provide the staffing, and to try and, you know, listen to our staff and give them the tools that they need.
Well, I'm going to follow up with the fact that, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I come from the law enforcement side of the house, and there, everybody from the chief down to the line officer is expected to be able to perform their duties. There's only X number of spots that we'll call light duty spots, and most of those are temporary. If you have anything past that, well, you know what? We can either Y-rate you, as we call it, assign you to the library, or we will retire you. But we have to do something to get them off the books. We have hardworking staff out there, no doubt, courageous staff that are showing up. I just don't know how we get the rest of the staff there. And all the people that are coming up with notes because they don't want to work in the facility, then if you have a note that you can't work in this facility, how is it I can have you work someplace else? Unless it's a temporary thing. There's got to be a method here. I don't know if it's the big HR at the county or department HR or the discipline process, but we have to get people back to work or cut them.
Agreed. We are looking at all of those issues. We are evaluating every doctor's note, every case. We are referring to PMU if necessary. If we, you know, determine there's fraud in any of these cases, we will refer to the DA. We've done that in the past. We are taking all the steps that we have been able to, working with DHR and with our subject matter experts, to come up with. We're open to additional feedback, because you're right. We need to be able to have our staff show up, be engaged, and, help turn lives around. That's our mission.
Well, I'll just close with one little comment here, and that is, I go out there, it's been understaffed, but there's been some recent changes, and one of my informants out there said that Scott Sanders was out there on a Sunday, so I appreciate that.
I wasn't going to say a word till it's time to do my presentation, but so thank you for that little plug, Don. I don't know if that's good or bad, but so kind of what Deanna, she kind of hit on all of it. So yes, there's an accountability piece, absolutely. But then there's also a piece where I think, and I'll own this, that we have to make a place safe for folks to come to work. So it's a twofold thing. It's a twofold thing. Because I was a DSO. I'm gonna say it again, it's 36 years in my department. And I've been in detention the entire time. So I was a DSO, I was a senior, so I understand all of the changes and all the dynamics. Probably when Frankie was around, I was a DSO, a young DSO at that, I'm gonna say young. But so it's a huge problem, but I do see a little light at the end of the tunnel, and some of the things go back to just, hey, Deanna, how you feeling today? What's going on? We're making some changes. We're going to do some of these things. I want you to be part of the team. So some of those things happen, and I think as we bring folks on to be part of the change and part of the fix, so they own some of it, that helps. So I want to be able to come back. I don't want to come back for 4 hours the next time, but next time I do come back, I want to be able to talk about, hey, I see that this is going in this direction. I'm not saying in August, because so Don, don't call me in August and say you said August. So I am saying maybe September, and I think we have to work with each other. All of us, I think all the groups have to work together. So I don't think it's a just one shop can fix it, because I think it's a huge issue, and I think the ideas are all over the place, and I'm open to all kind of ideas. Oh, I can't call on you. I'm sorry. I'm like
Commissioner Carrillo.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Scott, you remind me of a problem that at least for me, surfaced a few years ago, where in Central, some of the staff were complaining about other people picking their teams versus, one person saying, I'm going to make up this group of people who I see can be compatible with each other and then move forward. Did that happen during the establishment of the new units at LP?
So see, you're trying to get me in trouble. But I am saying that some team members are being chosen that's going to come in and kind of do some different things. I'm trying to answer your question without really answering your question. So the answer is a yes. There, the reality is there are people who want to do this kind of work, and I think that's huge if you get those people who want to do this kind of work.
I'm thinking about, and I appreciate both of you. That was a great presentation, by the way. And I really appreciate your candor and clarity about the problem. There's a roster of folks who just don't show up and people know of. And I think about these teams being established where someone can say, like, look, I know this person, I can work with this person, let me call this person and bring them in. Speaking about, thinking outside the box, or these other motivational approaches. So I'm grateful, I heard a yes, but I hope that the department really sees that there needs to be some flexibility within those who are in those units to select their teams. So it's good to know what's happening. Another question, actually. You gave a number in your presentation about normally there's a 5 or a 10, between a 5 and a 10% of call-outs and maybe other departments, and it's 29% within the probation department. Is there an example what happens elsewhere? I know the probation is very unique for a number of reasons, but I'm trying to get an HR how the inner workings are. Is there something different about probation versus other HR departments?
No, I mean, the toolbox is the same. We just would open it a lot more. So all of those methods that we talked about, but in a certain, again, I like analogies. I like to visualize things. HR leave management, we're the mechanic. You bring the car to us after it breaks and there's some symptoms. And you might think what those symptoms mean, but they might not mean anything. And we have to really look at all of these options and things. And that's why I talked about intrinsic motivation, because money motivation only works a little bit, and sometimes it actually makes it worse in the long run. I mean, there's studies, this isn't me, this is, data that's out there. We have to do everything. We have to pay people the right wages. We have to give them the right tools themselves. I mentioned earlier, I worked in mental health agencies. I've taken management of assaultive behavior because mental health agencies are great at everybody is putting that man on the moon. Everybody. I did trainings for GAIN when I worked at DPSS, even though I was HR. What we need to do as a department is we need to get everybody to want to be there and to have that intrinsic motivation, no matter what it is. If somebody needs to feel like they're part of a team, we need to be able to do that. If somebody feels like it doesn't matter if I come or not, they need that phone call, either from their supervisor or their peer. And if somebody's gaming the system, we need to call them on it. We need to say, hey, we've looked at this note, we have questions, and we're doing all of that. Or we've looked and you've called out 10 times and said you have FMLA, but we don't have FMLA on file for you. What's going on here? We're gonna hold people accountable because we're adults here. And again, I think this is Deanna speaking. I think we as a department need to show up, do the right thing, and make people understand that that's where we're at as a department. And that's what we're going to do. And people will show up that want to be there. And the ones that don't, we can help them find other employment.
Thank you.
Commissioner Munda?
Just a couple questions. Staff, how involved are staff in planning and discussing how we move forward? And I don't mean you're passing by while they're doing the work and they give you your opinion. Is there any structured conversation going on with staff, not only in the institutions, but also in the field that are feeling the impact of this crisis?
So let me figure out how I'm going to answer that question. So moving forward, there is going to be a yes, because I'm huge on everybody being part of the building this plane as we fly. So the answer is yes, that's coming. And I again, I won't be able to keep coming to this meeting and say it's coming, because the next time you're gonna be saying, well, you said that last month. But that is true, that is coming. One of the things that we want to do with SYTF is, because I want to look at it as completely new. So I want everybody who's there to have some input. Now, some things I might say something, hey, I want to do this, and the answer might be no, but it should be a no, but let's look at it this way. So I do want to include them in the building process. And so they will, those who are watching now, they will see something real soon, because I want people to be part of this.
But this is going to include field staff, because I mean, there's got to be at some point some right sizing in the field.
Right.
And what we're looking at a department that's going to have very few jobs in institutions and very few juvenile jobs, because everything's moving to the AB 109, which saved the department. The DJJ basically decision saved the department in some capacity. But is that filtering down to everybody in this department, so they all jump in and say, we really have to be part of the solution? Now, I know you can control the discussion at Silmar, but is somebody bringing in the field, because everybody in this department is impacted by this?
So I can say, point taken, and I can do what I can do. And one of my commitments is to do that very thing.
So the other question is, what is the likelihood of somebody in Silmar, a staff, working more than one 24-hour shift a week?
Currently, it's probably likely. It's probably more than one 24-hour. I don't think, here's what I'm gonna say. It could happen. We don't want that to happen. So everything, all the energies are moving that away from that. So we get back to where people aren't held over. So people can do the 8-hour shifts. At the end of this shift, they go home. So that's one of our focuses right now.
Well, so I guess where I'm confused, let's say you're doing shift change at 12 o'clock and somebody is up on their 24 hours and you're still short. So you let them go. You don't keep them another 8.
Yeah, that's the person we do it. I might go sit on somebody on the level or whatever, so that person can go.
Okay, so if you don't replace that person, you're adjusting for that. Why isn't that occurring at the 16-hour point rather than the 24-hour point? Why have we made this a practice that it's so unhealthy that, I mean, at some point, somebody's got to go home and we're going to be down the staff.
So you're 100% right, and that's where my focus is. So you're right about that. You don't get any argument out of me. That's what we want to happen. That's what will end up happening. That will be that's the goal.
You know, and this is more of a comment, because I sit here and I imagine myself being in the department and being a juvenile hall staff, being in the department 28 years. I'm 2 years away from retirement. And I don't know if I'm not going to work because I'm scared or because I'm practical. I'm going to throw away 28 years of a good career to go into a chaotic place and be in a position that ends up where I get hurt or somebody else gets hurt. I don't like the throwing around scared. I did 30 years and I never carried a gun. So it's different when you carry a gun. I didn't. I didn't have pepper spray. I had sleepless nights as a supervisor in the camps when the camps ran well. It's a very complicated job. And I just don't understand why the department has put in place the practice of a 24-hour shift. It's just unfair. And that's just a comment. It's unfair to the staff and it's unfair to the youth.
Commissioner Garcia-Leyes?
Thank you. So I was overly cynical about the leaves when I first became a commissioner. I thought about the 10 years I did as a high school teacher, where I broke up fights and I sometimes got punched by kids in the middle, trying to break up fights, and I always made it to my next class. And then while I was a commissioner, I turned 50, I pinched my sciatic nerve, and I had a conversation with a camp supervisor who said that he thinks the best way to reduce the number of people on leaves is to make everybody do yoga. And that it's really that the job is a much more physically strenuous job than people realize, because occasionally you have to break up fights and you pull muscles and things like that. And so basically what I've learned is and you just confirmed it, that these leave numbers are high, not because of fraud, but because that this is a physically challenging job that has become increasingly violent, and the chances of you having to break up a fight are much higher now than they were in the past. And so injury rates would understandably be much higher than they were in the past. So that comment about yoga no longer seems like a joke. It actually seems like it could really drastically reduce the amount of people on leave. So my question is, what is being done about injury prevention, rather than just investigating whether or not the injuries are real or not?
So I think this is going to sound really simplistic, but I'm going to give this answer. Making it a safer environment does that. Training people, retraining people, giving them the tools, being able to have a discussion with somebody after an incident, something went wrong. Hey, let's talk about this. Maybe we could have done it this way. And I think people also have to feel safe to have those discussions, to talk about those things. So that sounds real simplistic, but that's really the way I feel. And the reality is there's strength in numbers. So one of my things, I don't know if I can call it campaign, bring everybody back to work, but that is one of my campaigns. You bring folks back, things during the pandemic when the world thought that we were going to fall apart, that there was going to be nobody was going to come to work. And Stacey can attest to this. Barry J, it was the opposite. People came to work because they're like, hey, it's safe. I can go home at the end of the day. I'm not held over. Our overtime went down to almost nothing, to where people were like, hey, can I work? No, bye. We don't need, so that's where we want to get. It is not going to happen overnight, but I think being intentional and doing some of these things that everybody in this panel, because we all think the same. We think the same way. If I'm not I'm DSO Scott Sanders. If I'm not healthy, if I'm not safe, guess what I'm not going to do for this young person I'm caring for? So I understand how it goes. It all rolls downhill. So we have to take care of each other and maybe in a different way. We need to look at things differently. I've been in the department 36 years. Kevin's been around 35 years. We've been around for a minute. So things have changed. People change. And so I think sometimes the way we address things and look at things, those might need to change. And the way we figure this out is talking to them because they have all the answers. I have 3 kids. If they were listening, they'd be really upset with me. I have 3 kids who see the world different than me. So the value is I have to kind of sometimes go back to them and say, hey, what do you see that I'm not seeing? So we can try it. I think my grandmother used to say nothing fails but a try. So I think we have to try some different things to solve this problem. And I think we'll have to have some discussions. When you look at a problem and you figure out how to solve it, at least you think you figured out, the best thing to do is come back another 30 days, 60 days. Hey, is this working? And if it's not working, let's go in a different direction. Let's try to figure this out. So that's the simplistic answer. No, no.
I know
August
that,
of next week.
you know, LAPD Metro Department, they get to work out on the clock. You know, stretching is a proven way of avoiding injury. Ms. Carlisle, is injury prevention, like actual physical exercise to prevent injuries, is that a tool that human resources departments use or consider, or is that considered
It
not allowed?
is.
Can you comment on that?
I can. So in 2019, we developed a wellness plan for probation under the umbrella, and a lot of the focus has been on more of the emotional and mental support, so peer support, a program I'm very, very proud of because we finally have one, and we have 90 wonderful volunteers throughout the department that are volunteering for peer support, but it's under the umbrella of wellness, and our wellness plan is intended to address all facets of wellness. We partner with, obviously, the county. The county has a lot of wellness programs for our staff. In fact, this Saturday, not that I'm plugging DHR, but this Saturday at Dockweiler is a kickoff for the county's kind of annual wellness activities events. So there are things like that. One of the challenges, of course, is that in our institutions, it's really hard to say, yeah, go take that hour and, work out. We have looked at wellness rooms before. We even have, I think, some equipment in some rooms sort of designated. What we need to, we're at the ground level, right? We need to make sure the car drives. And then once the car drives, we'll put the accessories on. I think we need to look at it holistically. I agree with you. Stretching, I didn't think it was critical until I went through PT, but it's critical. So I think that's a great suggestion. I do know that they've already looked at kind of enhancing use of those rooms and how that would work. I just think there's so many strategies right now that it kind of filters a little bit. But the general answer is yes, we're very invested in wellness. We have an injury and illness prevention plan. We have county partners with tools that we can utilize. We just need to get us to a base level where staff are able to walk into work, and then we can go from there and enhance.
So do we have, I should have asked this question first. Do we have a sense of the number of people who are out on leave due to injury, that injury, well, one, I wonder how many of those injuries are the results of assaults? That was a question that was asked. It's a very good question. But the second question is, do we have any sense of what sort of physical wellness could have prevented that injury from leading to a leave? Or is that just, beyond the scope of what we're able to know about our employees' leaves?
Well, right now, trying to just manage the actual cases and the data that's required to manage, roughly 50% caseload. We haven't dug in to preventative on each case. But again, we have a third-party administrator Sedgwick, who manages our workers' comp claims. I can say I have looked at numbers for workers' comp claims, assault, and I can't remember if it was for this body or a different body, but those numbers have risen in the last few years, obviously, which means we have more staff out. And when our staff are out, our peace officers are out, they're out on something called 4850. And 4850 refers to the law in California that provides that benefit, and they can be out up to a year with full pay. And our goal is to, get them back in and have them working towards recovery, because studies have shown that when you bring people back to work, they recover quicker. And, usually there's a better outcome at the end of their recovery process. So all of these things are things that we look at holistically. But, we have a scarcity of resources because we have such an immense caseload. So I don't want to say it's not important. It's very, very important. But first we have to put that mask on and start breathing, and then we'll get to flying that airplane that Scott's building as we go.
Okay, and the last thing I just want to say on this issue. Oh, no, I had another question. Sorry. We have 403 vacancies in juvenile. There's no hiring freeze on those 400 positions, and there hasn't been for quite a long time. Is that correct?
Not entirely.
Hey, can you explain? Because this is something that comes up a lot with people who talk to me. They're like, oh, it's everybody says that it's the hiring freeze that's caused all this problem. And I'm thinking, I swear it was over a year ago that we lifted the hiring freeze on a number of these positions.
So a year ago, we were given permission. We were in a hiring freeze in juvenile institutions, and we were given permission by the board to hire up to 150. We're very close to that number. There's been a lot of discussion about what happens when we hit that number, and we're working with CEO, and we believe we can continue to hire because obviously hiring is critical as well. We have a long workforce, and we anticipate that we're going to have turnover in the next few years as well when staff retire and run through. So we need to constantly be hiring, and I won't get into the hiring, the way it works in our department, but it is critical to always be hiring because all of our positions, all of our swarm positions all the way up to DPO2 generally come in through those entry-level positions, go through juvenile, and then promote up and promote up. It's at the DPO2 level, it's a very, very small percentage that we're able to entice from other counties.
Would you have been able to hire more than the 100 and something if there were more positions that you were allowed to hire for? Or is that really, it's just hard to hire in law enforcement right now, and that's what we were able to do?
There are a myriad of challenges, but we were under a hiring freeze, we for a while. And so the turnover was impacted by that. Now that we have the ability to hire, we're running into, and we are not alone in this, we've talked to all of our partners up and down the state. It is really challenging right now to hire in law enforcement, regardless of what agency you are. So, we're competing against a lot of hungry agencies out there, and, it's challenging, but we have, in the last year, we've really focused on recruitment, enhancements. Again, we're looking at a lot of different methodologies to try and get our recruitment up and running, but it is critical that we are constantly recruiting, that we never shut it off completely, because once we shut it off completely, it takes us about 9 months to a year to get, from start to finish again. And so,
So I just want to leave with one last thought that hasn't come up here during this agenda item, which is reducing population. So a lot of these injuries, a lot of these problems are a result of a staff to youth population that's really awful, that's skewed really badly. And we think, how do we get people to work? How do we increase staff as a way to fix that ratio? But the other way to fix it is by reducing the population. If we were to release half of the youth that we incarcerate right now, that would allow the existing staff to be able to do their jobs better, and would, I believe, would end some of these problems of people being held over. So I would hope that everybody who's concerned about staff safety, about the staffing numbers, would also support and is looking for ways to reduce the population as much as possible.
I actually have some questions, and I'll pass it to you, Commissioner Meredith. Ms. Carlo, can you sorry, I just have some like clarifying questions. On this document you shared related to callouts, I think at Barry J, there's a little note above that that says reporting data using the callout system has been broken down and reported by shift and location since March. Can you just explain what that means? Like what callout system and?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the process improvements that we developed in the last year, working with DHR and with our IT folks and county council, was a call-out system, a very simple system so that we could free up. The idea was, how do we free up our ODs to be able to go out and help, hands-on, and not have 10 people answering phones at one time, get the information in quicker. So, the leads can, okay, I know I have 40 people who called out for this shift right away without having to do, paper stuff. So the call out system was developed and it rolled out, I want to say November, and I'm sorry, I don't have that, but, and what the call out system does is it not only allows staff to, call in electronically, but it also starts to identify some things that puts us ahead of the game as far as leaves. So it asks, are you calling out because of FMLA? So there are some questions we can ask Commissioner Meredith about. We can ask if you're calling out for yourself, for a family member, are you calling out for personal or sick? We're allowed to ask that. I just can't ask you, well, what are you sick with? What's your diagnosis? We don't need to know that. But so the system allows us to get a little bit more information about the reason people are calling out. It allows us to preempt if someone says, yes, I've called out for 3 days in a row and I have a qualifying thing, then we know, okay, maybe we need to reach out and offer them FMLA, CFRA, the alphabet soup of protected leaves.
But that's been broken down since March?
Yes. So the data that you see there we've only started gathering that and breaking it down that way since March from that system, because it was a new system. So we got a lot of data and we were checking just to see, okay, how many people called out. Since March, the locations have been breaking it down and starting to go in. Our performance management team is looking at that data. So that's why there's the caveat. Prior to that, we just didn't have the time or the resources to go in and break it down by shift and things like that. We weren't looking at it through that lens.
Okay, so is the call out system up and running now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. And then so when folks call out, you said you review the notes. Is that all call outs? Is that just related to the intermittent and continuous leave and the modified duty?
So those are all different buckets, right? So if someone calls out, they might be calling out because they have intermittent leave, or they might be calling out because their child is sick or they got a flat tire on the way. So they're going to indicate what that reason is. And then we are going behind and we're validating all of that information. So if I called out and I said, I'm calling out FMLA, because that used to happen a lot. And what we found out is they weren't approved for FMLA. And so either they're not being completely honest with us, or they think they have FMLA, but maybe it expired last month because they need a new doctor's note, or they have the packet and they forgot to turn it in. There's a myriad of reasons, but it allows us to follow up in the moment. Whereas before, when we had handwritten notes that were kept at the location, we didn't know. So yes, all of those are being followed up, not only by the location, because they should be reaching out, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? I see here you broke your arm. Let me send you out a packet, whatever it is. But also by our performance management to see if there's any kind of issues there. Is this someone who has said they have FMLA several times and they don't? Are they exceeding any of our policies for call out for, random reasons? So we have them looking, and the chief has implemented a new team who's also helping both the department and PM with looking at those rapidly. Because again, the faster you address issues with anyone, the quicker you have a resolution, the quicker people come back to work. I know that if I was at home and nobody called to see how I was doing, I'd be like, they don't care, I'm not going back. But if somebody called me and said, hey, Deanna, are you okay? Do you need anything? Do you need a packet? You know, were you hurt on the job? Do you do you need leave? I would feel like they were invested in me, and I would, in return, hopefully invest in them. So
what's the
there's
timeline though? What is the timeline between?
Now?
Yeah, like is it a 24-hour? Is it a?
So
Or
we're
if you
working.
can even share that protocol, like
Well-
what it looks like, so we can get a sense.
So when we started doing this last November with PM review, we were looking back like 6 months. And then we started catching up. So now with PM's review, performance management's review of those records, we're about 30 days. But with this new team that the chiefs put together, they're trying to address things within the same week. I can't speak to their process and protocols. But my understanding is it's within the same week. They're trying to make sure that there's contact made and follow-up made.
Is there any way that you all can provide kind of some breakdown or like more, I guess it's, intermittent leave could mean a million things, as could continuous leave, as could, I don't know, modified duty. Is there a way to provide a more like comprehensive breakdown of what it looks like for, like how many folks are calling out because of FMLA? How many folks are calling out because of, I don't know, assault on staff? Or how many folks are calling out because they simply got injured just living their life?
So what I hear is two different questions there, because the leave data is separate from the call out data.
Sure.
Right?
Okay.
So on the leave data, for example, for anyone who's out on full-time leave, yeah, we can break it down and say, of that 80 are on 4850, 30 are on FMLA, whatever it is, medical personal leave, whatever it is. We could break that number down for you for the full-time leave. For the call-outs, the employees actually select what the reason is. So the data is there.
Okay.
The problem is we don't know if it's accurate. So, that's part of that follow-up and checking. We don't have a process in place right now we can run the report and get the data.
Okay.
But I don't know that it's valid.
Okay. Are there any additional questions or comments?
I just had one quick question. You probably may.
Can you speak into the mic just so that our folks listening remotely?
All these new officers that we've hired in the last 24 months, what's the retention rate? Because I keep hearing that a lot of them are quitting shortly after they get hired.
So I don't have that off the top of my head. I do know that we've had some, but I can get that information over to you very quickly. I just don't have it with me right now. We have been tracking that.
Okay, if you could send that to Wendy, then she'll get it to us.
Yes, Commissioner Canales, and then I think we need to move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure you've said this already, but for when you call out sick, is a doctor's note required after like 3 days or something like that?
Okay, so because we're in the emergency declaration, we're requiring a medical note for any call out for sick that's in the institutions. Now, the county has a policy and procedure that if you call out for more than 5 days, then you need a doctor's note. And that's really to, again, meet FMLA and CFRA requirements so that we're placed on notice that, hey, maybe somebody needs some protected leave information. But as a department, because of the departmental emergency, yes, if somebody's calling out from an institutional assignment, whether they be deployed or whether they be assigned there, then they do need to provide a medical note.
Even just for 1 day?
Yes.
Because of the emergency. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just have one last request. If you could provide the breakdown related to intermittent leave and continuous leave, if it is the 4850, if it's the FMLA, I think it would be really helpful to know,
Well,
I don't know if that's.
I can for the continuous. Intermittent leave refers almost specifically to FMLA.
Okay.
Because that's either FMLA or CFRA. CFRA has some intermittent leave, but mostly it's covered under FMLA. So, the majority of them are going to be,
okay,
like 99% would be covered under FMLA.
Okay, but then if you could provide the breakdown then for continuous leave, I
Sure.
think that'd be super helpful. Okay, I'm going to move us on to, actually, we're going back to agenda item number 5, where we're going to discuss and take appropriate action on a report from LA County Probation Department on the number of young people, including young people in secure youth treatment facilities who've been charged with an additional crime for something that occurred within the facility since January 2023. I'm pleased to report that probation responded quickly to this request for information so that we could have a discussion with information today. We asked them for the following information, which is provided in a written document attached to the agenda, and that's total number of youth who face new charges, number of those who were SYTF youth, number of youth charged in adult court, number of youth who received new juvenile charges, and a policy that determines if new charges will be filed after an incident, and the approval process for agreeing to press new charges. So Bureau Chief Scott Sanders is going to talk us through these numbers, explain the process, and talk to us about the policy they are developing on this issue. If you'd like to provide a public comment on this item, please raise your hand now on WebEx. If you'd like to provide a public comment on this item, please raise your hand now. If you're, in the room, you can approach the front of the room to get online when the presentation ends. And again, public comment will be limited to a minute. Mr. Sanders.
Okay, so this is going to be really kind of straightforward, and I'm going to go a little out of order because you already answered the question about the policy that we're working on, so that answers that question, that we're working on it. So the total number of youth who receive new charges is 10. The total number of SYTF youth who receive new charges is also 10, so it's the same number. Number of youth charged in adult court, 9. Number of youth receive new juvenile charge is 1. So to kind of give you a brief, again, we're working on a real, I don't want to say real, we're working on the policy as it relates to this. But kind of what happens now is once an incident happens, while a young person is in custody, the evidence is gathered, including written statements, narratives from officers, pictures, if videos are present, witness statements, any medical notes, documents, injuries to victims, and then the superintendent or / directors will get together and look at that information. So we have an SDPO, and he has a team who look at these charges, bring kind of a synopsis of what happens to the superintendent, director, also in conjunction with the DA. So they talk to the DA to ensure that they're actually fileable charges. And then if the decision is made to move forward to file them, then the charges are filed. That's kind of the nutshell of it.
Okay.
That is it.
That concludes your presentation.
That concludes.
Okay. Do we have any written or live public comment for item number 5?
So I just want to check to make sure we didn't receive anything written. Okay, so right now we don't have any written public comment for this item. Again, if you'd like to comment on this item virtually, please raise your hand using the raise your hand function. Call-in users, again, please dial *3 to raise your hand to get in the queue. And of course, if you're here in person, please feel free to line up and approach the microphone. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with our live public commenters first, and then we'll go to our virtual commenters. So if you could just please start by stating your name and you have a minute.
Thomas Bell again. I just got a quick question. How many times does it take for a young adult, one like 18 or over, to assault someone before they actually get charges?
Thank you for your comment. Other public commenters? See a couple of people.
Good afternoon, Stacy Ford, Local 685. Let me just say this. You guys are requesting information on charges that have been filed on the young people that are in custody. And I keep coming to this meeting over and over and over. And what I would like to see is the transparency between the department, the Probation Oversight Commission, and our members on information in detail on staff that are being assaulted, that are being hospitalized by the young people that we're supervising. The second thing to that is you talk about the facilities being, the staff not coming to work. We have to provide a safe environment. It's not that staff don't want to be at work or officers don't want to be at work. They want to be at work. But the conditions that we're in now are unsafe. Some of these conditions you created. This board right here, you created some of these conditions. The commission prior to you also created these conditions along with the Board of Supervisors. You took away our resources. We don't have any resources. We have staff that went to LP yesterday for the first time, and their question to me was, when they took the pepper spray on our way in, what is the alternative? Why are we being reactive and not proactive? And I think we need to have a discussion right here and bring in some of the line staff and allow them to sit on this panel to address these issues, because we can't address it when we only have 1 minute. So that's my proposal to this commission, is that you invite some of these staff that have been hurt and allow them to sit on this panel and explain. But you have listened to everybody but us. You listened to the community-based organization.
Mr. Ford, that's your time.
And we need to
Thank
be heard
you.
as well.
We appreciate your comment. Let's go to the next live comment.
And I respect staff and I appreciate staff. I've met many great staff, and I don't know if I've ever crossed your path, but I've certainly done my time in juvenile hall. We're talking about children that are traumatized, neglected, abused, disadvantaged. The racial makeup of the kids in the juvenile hall speaks to systemic racism. You know, they're in there trying to adjust to a new environment, and that will take on many different forms. You got children that are fighting, you know, they're angry and they're taking it out on the next kid. And what I'm saying is that the kids have special needs. They have needs that are not being addressed, and it can manifest itself into violence where, you know, maybe they do look at the staff member who, you know, is doing his best, but maybe is doing something that is triggering or provoking to the child, and then that may, but in my time, I've never seen a child in juvenile hall take off on the staff. Now, if they're fighting, you know, in the course of fighting, you know, there's, you know, wrestling and tussling and separation and whatnot, but an actual staff assault in prison, I see that. And it's unfortunate if it is turning that way. And if that's the case, then they should wear protective, you know, clothing, whatever measures that they take in the adult setting. But
That's your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Other public commenters? Okay, see two more.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Stacy Nunez. I'm an education attorney with the Youth Justice Education Clinic and here on behalf of the Education Justice Coalition. I work with youth at Barry J in Secure Track and with some of the youth that have been transferred to Men's Central from Secure Track with these new adult charges. And it's honestly saddening to hear how normalized prison has become for these young people at Barry J. I've had the clients that have been transferred tell me that even before they turned 18, they had some officers tell them, you better watch out because the moment you turn 18, you're gonna get transferred. And I know that might not be all of them, but it's enough that it's become normalized for these young people. And I'm glad that it was brought up that a lot of these kids do have special needs. That doesn't disappear when they graduate high school. Like the IRPs that the court requires, there's programming that's supposed to be provided to adequately and appropriately serve them. But why aren't we also including safety plans in that, like behavior safety plans that not only address the young person's needs and their safety, but staff safety? Because then staff will also know how to address this young person's need when they have these outbursts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. Thank you. Sorry.
And I think we're going to have to wrap up in-person public comment after Mr. Basuano just because of.
All right, I'm gonna go because
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Daniel Basuano again. I'm with the Education Justice Coalition as an Education Justice Youth Coordinator. I just wanted to speak on behalf of this agenda item because to me it seems very concerning. And yeah, I'm not here to say that staff and their physical well-being isn't important because it is, right? But when we're putting kids in a cage, because it is a cage, the door locks from the outside, which makes it a cage, right? Their behavior issues shouldn't take them to the level of being sent to county jails. We shouldn't be getting ad charges that reflect adult when we're already caged in a juvenile facility. It doesn't make sense to me how we're using that as a punishment to get the kids to act right when it's just gonna make them not want to act right. It's gonna make them want to act out. A lot of kids I've noticed prefer going to county jail, and that sucks because of the lack of resources in juvenile facilities. And this is things that we need to address. We shouldn't be sending kids to county jail. They're kids still. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Hi, my name is Cookie Lamel. I'm with AFSCME Local 685, and I've heard a number of reasons that people are not coming to work, so to speak, but nobody mentions Sedgwick. Sedgwick is the organization that assigns people to whenever they're going to get surgery or whatever illness that they have or been attacked or something, whatever it is that they actually need to get rid of that ailment. And Sedgwick can many times take so long. People have sometimes gone back to work when they shouldn't have gone back, re-injure themselves, or add to whatever issue it is that they have already gained, and it's just a mess. So it is also that people are not, it's more the county itself that allows.
Sorry, your time is up. And just as a reminder, we are on agenda item, what is it? Sorry. 5, which is actually connected to the additional charges for young folks who are currently incarcerated. So that's the focus of this agenda item. Virtual public comment?
We do.
Okay, and I think we're gonna have to close the queue after these two folks. Thank you.
We're going to start with Angela.
Congratulations, Sanders. Well, okay. Personal level regarding staffing and everything, I've worked and been deployed. These staff have said they do not feel safe in there. And for the gentleman who said that this should not be a punishment, this is the kids that are in jail, the staff are in there with them. So they're in jail with them. So they're restricted. We don't have phones to contact our elder parents or our kids to make sure everything's okay. We don't, I mean, some of the kids have still maybe contrabands. Please push the searches for the minors to make it safe for them. That's the language that I feel you guys hear. And then to make it safe for staff. Okay, continue searches when they leave, when they come into the facilities, for staff to go ahead and feel safe. Just protect them and give them a way of feeling safe with the minors. The consequences that they have is the consequences they need. At 15, at 17, at 18, if you're a parent, your children have consequences. We're not punishing them. There's results for doing negative behavior. Thank you for the opportunity to express myself as a deployed DPO.
Thank you for your comment. Next up, we have Crystal.
Deep breath. Advocating for the youth and the triggers in regards to the safety and the staff not feeling safe on site. Having an intentional, strategic of safety coming from a special task enforcement team or someone to where what is the approach with these youth? I keep hearing the man that's overseer of this facility mention about how his staff are targeted and the harm that they're having. So my question is, how are your staff treating these youth on site and their approach while they're in their care? Youth are not designed to just be harmful and attack people like that's a normal behavior. There's triggers in your attitude and your language and the way keeps to cause these conflict in this unsafe environment. So I wanted to advocate again on the youth and ask what are the triggers, and that all staff and all youth should be safe on site, and how can it be in a strategic plan and task force to allow this to happen?
Thank you for your comments.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have questions or comments related to Mr. Sanders' presentation, this agenda item?
I do, but I think we're about to lose quorum.
Got 5. So, haven't lost it.
We have 5.
We have 5. You have, okay. Okay, so, and once we lose our quorum, we can't really discuss anything. But until we lose Commissioner Terry, go for it. Commissioner Garcia-Lace.
So, Mr. Sanders, it looks like this is yours because we're getting 0 from the halls and the camps, which makes me very happy. I was afraid that this report was going to look a lot worse than this. The 10, were any of them at Kilpatrick?
No.
Okay, that's also good news that I was worried about. Has anybody picked up more than one charge or charges on more than one offense?
2 of them have picked up 2 charges.
Okay. Has anybody been convicted, or have they only had information filed against them?
2, I'm sorry, 2.
2 have been
Yes.
had convicted. How long did that process take from when the crime occurred to when they were transferred to county jail?
So I'm gonna have to get back because some of these occurred before I got there. I was just reporting on, because these numbers went back from January.
Okay.
So I didn't put that as part of this. I can get that back.
Okay. I mean, I would like to look at each of these as a failure of the system. But at the same time, part of me says, well, maybe some of these kids are better off, both for themselves and everybody else, in county jail instead of Barry J, if Barry J is as bad for them as it seems to be. So based on that, I am a little concerned that this is being seen as a behavior management, right? Is get them out and get them to adults so they don't hurt anybody. They don't hurt us. They hurt maybe other, whatever. So part of that is timing. Like if it takes a year, then it's not a very good short-term solution to violent behavior from SYTF youth. If it takes 2 months, then I worry it's something that will get overused. So how long that takes, I think, is an important piece of data. So I'm going to ask you about that. That's all I have.
Okay. So this actually feels pretty horrific to me. I mean, I think this is only since January, and we've had young people being dispositioned to SYTF for over a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And so just in the last 6 months, and the population has hovered around 70. So we have over 10% of the young people with SYTF dispositions being cycled to our adult system, which I think in theory runs afoul to what our juvenile system is supposed to do for young people, which is like rehabilitate, which is the antithesis of like punishment, incarceration, jail, all of those things. So this feels wildly tragic to me. And I think part of it also, to Commissioner Garcia-Lay's point is like, we have a system that is in crisis. It's creating a crisis for our young people, and the only folks who are paying the price are the young folks. And I understand, from other folks' public comment that there are staff who are scared to come to work, there are staff who are being assaulted. Unfortunately, as I think I've heard Commissioner Meredith say, that is unfortunately part of the job, and they get a paycheck. These young people don't get a paycheck. They don't sign up for this. So just as a statement, I mean, this just feels wildly tragic to me that we are just preparing over 10% of our secure track population for prison. That's what we've done here. But I know Commissioner Terry has to leave, and we can't really engage in much discussion, so that's that. I I'm actually not sure what happens now once Commissioner Terry leaves. We do have 2 agenda items that I think we're going to have to table and perhaps hold a town hall for. Say that what? Okay, so before you leave, Commissioner Terry, we are going to table agenda items. Sorry, too many papers here.
8 and 9.
8 and 9, and we will likely hold a town hall for those agenda items for the public to engage in conversations related to OC spray and
The annual inspections of the Probation Oversight Commission.
and then agenda item 10 is matters not posted on the agenda. Does that need to be? Okay, great. Not great, but okay, thank you. And then general public comment, if we don't have a quorum. Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Okay. So if there is, we're moving to agenda item number 11, opportunity for the public to address the POC. So this is an invitation for members of the public to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Sarah, if you could please facilitate public comment for us.
Okay, so I believe we have not received any written public comment for this item. Again, for our virtual participants, if you'd like to comment, please raise your hand using the raise hand function. Call-in users, again, please dial *3 to raise your hand to get in the queue. And again, if you're here in person, please approach the front and line up as these folks have done. So we're going to go ahead and start this with our live public commenters, and then we'll move on to any virtual commenters. So please approach the mic, state your name, and begin with your comment. And again, I believe we are limiting comment to 1 minute.
Hi, Alfredo Jimenez. I'm here with the Children's Law Center as a law clerk. I just wanted to thank the commissioners for being here for so long and giving your input. It's been very great input. I noticed earlier when we were talking about the JCC, there was talk of CLC, the Children's Law Center, being included for the DCFS children. But one of the things that I've noticed in this clerkship, at least, is we run into the issue of who's going to take lead, whether it's going to be probation or DCFS, because the child just or youth gets, kind of ping pong back and forth. So that's just something that I wanted to bring up, is thinking more about involving DCFS into these matters when it involves child in the dependency system. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We'll take the next speaker.
Just real quick, one, I don't feel like we have done everything possible. I know somebody said that before, that we tried a lot of things. We haven't tried promoting. There's people in the camp that would be willing to go to the SYTF through promotion. We haven't tried that. We haven't tried maybe offering a camp schedule in the halls where somebody goes in for 16, knowing that they got 4 days off, be less likely to call out. So there's the 2 things we could try as well. Also, just to answer the question from the gentleman earlier, the fact that you don't know that I've put hands on anybody shows that I haven't beat up any kids. Just to answer that question real quick. And as far as restraints, I've been in hundreds of them, and they all come out just fine.
Thank you for your comment. We'll go to our next public commenter.
I appreciate everything that the committee is doing, this commission is doing, with the best interests of these children and their futures. It really is, these children, like women, have special needs, and those need to be addressed, I think, to put them on the right path. And, I was 11 when I first went to the halls, and I went back when I was 13, and I went back when I was 15, when I was tried as an adult. And the day after I got tried as an adult, I didn't go to school. It wasn't available. They put me in the county jail with the adults. And I didn't get my GNG until I was 29. And it was really me feeling like the state or whatever was trying to set me up for failure. And it turned me into a study machine. I started to study for like over a decade. I studied for 8 hours a day with this chip on my shoulder. And it's troubling to see that these kids are really at a disadvantage. And I appreciate the work that we're doing to try to help them. It's not about the staff. The staff are grown adults and they can find another job. We're sitting here trying to help these children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Vivian Wong again, education attorney with YJEC and the Education Justice Coalition. The reports we've heard today regarding the transition of youth from Central and Barry J to Los Padrinos have been vague at best. We need to hear from LACO and probation together about a concrete, detailed plan about how youth will have uninhibited access to education and what instruction will actually look like. We should all be aware that young people have historically lacked access to education. By education, I do not mean independent packet work where they receive no instruction. From my experience, probation has cited safety concerns as a reason for denying youth the opportunity to go to school. We must acknowledge that we are in a prolonged state of crisis in these facilities, exacerbated by a lack of clear transition planning, and under these circumstances, young people are likely to continue to have disrupted access to education. It also concerns me that young people will be left in the medical unit at Central because historically they do not offer any education access. We need to see the numbers, how many youth will be there and continue to be denied an education.
Thank you for your comments.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry. Do we have any virtual public comment? Okay, looks like we have a couple.
We're going to start with Yasmin.
Hopefully so. My name is Yasmin Amani McMorrin. I'm the Director of Ed Equity for the Children's Defense Fund California, and I'm here as a part of the Education Justice Coalition. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. In all things, I encourage this body and others to center and encourage the leadership and experience of system-impacted youth for successful policy and planning for the future. And while I appreciate the staffing concerns, our main priority should be making it safe for children and youth in the camps and halls. And I believe that workforce safety will naturally flow from the centering of safe conditions of the young people. Resources must be spent to ensure young folks are getting fresh air, visits, classroom-based education, not just packets, substantive programming, adequate mental health care, and all other resources needed and not further or future incarceration. I hope there is an equal or more emphasis of decarceration of the young people as well. Again, thank you for this time and for your work on this body.
Thank you so much for your comment. I think we have one more.
Calling user 310245.
Okay, here we go. Thank you. This is Mel. I just had two quick points. I was pretty horrified by two comments that were made earlier that were completely off base. One is, I mentioned before that it's really more appropriate to not refer to the residential care as putting kids in cages. And I say that because those of us who actually care about our clients and the kids and the justice involved youth, we don't refer to the places as cages because they're not animals. So every time you use the word cage, please understand that you're indirectly calling them an animal, and they're not. They're human beings. They need guidance and are depending on us for that. The second thing, I believe Commissioner Marriott was inaccurately quoted. No one signed up. There's not a part of the job spec to be stabbed in the neck, to be beaten, to be kicked. When I know when I applied for the job
Sorry,
25
I
years
believe
ago, it
that's your
wasn't there.
time, Mr. Bailey. Given that we're well over time, thank you all for joining us, sharing your comments. You know where to find us, social media, YouTube, all the things. And with that, can I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Oh, just kidding. Okay, that's it. All right. Take good care, be well. See you in a month.